Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is July 27th, 2020. I would like to call to order the regular board meeting of the Othello School District Board of Directors. We will begin tonight with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on. I want to take the time to welcome all our guests that are on this Zoom meeting tonight. Thank you for joining us. Those of you that are watching us via YouTube, welcome as well. Thank you for being with us. I will begin with the disclosure that I have for what seems too many months now. Hopefully we can avoid technical difficulties. Those of us that are going to be voting tonight, one thing we'll do a little different tonight is when we have a vote, I will ask that you raise your hand as a yay, just to make sure that we are all in one accordance and we are voting in the affirmative. Having said that, I will entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda.
I move we approve tonight's agenda.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Stevenson to approve tonight's agenda, seconded by Director Prowse. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Moving on, item B1.
There's some background noise. Can you mute everyone except for the board? Whoever's the administrator of the call of the Zoom, can you mute everyone except for the board or Mike?
He's doing it now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jen. Moving on, is there any public comment, Talia? Okay. I'd like to remind the public that there is opportunity for public comment. The instructions are posted both on the school website and the Othello School Board Directors site as well. Moving on, we will proceed to item B2, which is board member discussions. First item on that is the legislative report. Director Stevenson.
So I wanted to mention, I think that most of you probably received most of the board members. I'll wait for muting. We need some more things muted. We had a bunch more people join. I'm still getting a ton of background noise. We need everybody needs to mute except for there's a few phone calls and then there's some people's names that are. Okay.
Go ahead, Jen.
All right. So for the board, I think most of you probably received an email from WSDA today, Washington State School Directors Association, about the General Assembly. Our director area, we're in director area 11, and we have a Zoom, I think it's a Zoom, I'm not sure. Anyways, with other members of our director area to talk about General Assembly. There will be kind of like a mini training on how and what's going to happen at General Assembly, especially if you've never been there before. I think only 2 of the 5 of us have even been. Mike, I'm not sure if you went to one or not. Ken, I know you were the voter at last one. How to do voting, since it's going to be the first virtual assembly we've ever had. And we should be getting emails. They had said that all the information was due on the 31st of July, but we should be getting them like on the 3rd of August. All of the different amendments and changes to WASDA's both legislative and long-term changes. And so that will be a really good thing to attend, to be able to ask questions or just be able to understand. And then we as a board will need to make some decisions about who is going to be our voting delegate, who's going to be the backup voting delegate, and those kinds of things, so that we can have that assembly vote for our district. And then how and where we want to accommodate that. Do we want to try and put those two people at the district office, or I'll do it from our offices or work or home or whatever. So those will be some things that we'll need to come up and discuss. So, and a lot of that stuff is what we want WASDA to have as their issues that they will be addressing during the next legislative session. And so it's an important meeting. So any questions about what is the General Assembly or from other board members?
I just have a comment, Jen. So is this is one collective vote from the board, correct? It's not individual votes.
It's one collective vote from our district.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is on August 12th?
One vote.
Yeah, August 12th from 5:30 to 7:30?
5:30 to 7, yes.
Okay.
And that will be run by our district, by myself and Derek from Walla Walla and Jill from, I think she's in Richland. We'll be running it with probably a WASDA person just assisting the technical side, just explaining the what and the why and how everything is going to be. And we'll have had time to hopefully look through our the book that they'll be sending with all the current proposals, so that if we have any issues that we want to make amendments to or those kinds of things, that's another thing that we'll be discussing at that. Do we want to make any amendments to those changes? So
our next meeting is the 10th, correct?
yes.
So hopefully by then we will have received these books, and if we got any questions or if we need to make modifications, or we'll come up with a plan at that time, whether it'll be you and I, Jen, or the entire board, or it'll be here in the district, or what we'll do at that time. Hopefully,
because I'm sorry, keep going.
Go ahead.
Because I'm on the resolutions committee, I think it might be best, I still need to ask some more questions. It might be best if I'm not one of the official voter, I mean, maybe the backup, but because I will be doing a lot of, like I'll have to stand and they'll pan, I don't know. I'll have to say, I have a very specific script that I have to say during the legislative session for some of the different issues anyways, already. And so I'd be great as a backup, but not as the official voter. Personally, I think.
I know I am on the nominating committee, so I know for sure I'll attend that. But like I said, we'll have this discussion at the next board meeting and fine tune the details of this.
Right, but we don't need to have a voter yet. The legislative or the General Assembly isn't until September, but it would be good to discuss it at the meeting on the 10th. Yes.
Okay.
So if we can add that to the agenda, that'd be good, and to see who's available for the 12th anyways.
All right. Talia's taking note of that as we speak.
Perfect.
All right, next item on board member discussion. I need to commend the board members that did their board self-assessment last meeting. Unfortunately, I was one of the ones that did it, so please, let's keep ourselves accountable, and after tonight's meeting, fill out our board self-assessment, please. Moving on to item number 3, or bullet number 3, board retreat dates. We have received an email as far as moderator options. I want to open it up to potential dates, places. I know our calendars, I know mine is looking for a vacation spot somewhere, but we need to try to put our heads together on some dates for this board retreat. Any ideas?
Do we have an estimated length of time that it will take? I mean, are we talking like 4 hours? Are we talking 8 hours? That might control the date.
I think we should plan on a whole day. Just give ourselves enough time to have thorough discussions. So I'm thinking it would be probably an 8-hour thing. Chris, does the district have any ideas or any proposed dates?
I just know that my option for a location at my family cabin, they're having some renovations done after the 1st of September. And so if that was a location that we were to choose, it would need to be the middle of October. So I don't know if we want to wait that long or if we're wanting to go somewhere else or anything like that. That's just FYI. My location won't be available till the middle of October.
Yeah, Chris is notifying me that we'll try to keep look for some more local destinations or locations to hold this at. We'll see what availability is, and then we will reconvene or we'll table this at least to the next board meeting to try to crystallize this and come up with a definite date. Unless someone's got a drop dead date, if they know location already, find out if they're called, maybe there's
What are some of like the ideal things? I mean, do we have a specific moderator picked first? And then what are some of the specific like ideal things that moderator wants? Do we just need like a space like the boardroom? Or do we want to go away so that we don't have the attachments and we're not distracted by local attachments? What, maybe some direction there?
My idea is if we do say local, it is somewhere in the Tri-Cities. Whether, I know Chris mentioned at the ESD office or something like that, we could have a room to ourselves. As far as moderator, I think we received a couple options. I'm for the one that's least expensive. I'm thinking that should be our, as far as the place and location and moderator. Of course, we can decide that as a board as far as the two options that were presented to us, or if someone wants to think of someone else. But I think the two options presented were feasible, and I like the one that's got the less dollar sign attached to it. And Jen, as far as a topic or an agenda, I think we can have a short discussion about that and come up with some type of agenda to hand to the moderator so they could develop some sort of plan, some sort of idea of topics discussed and time allotments and things of that nature. So I think if any one of us wants to come up with some sort of agenda, I'm sure Chris and the district will come up with something, and maybe we can combine the two and come up with an agenda for the day.
What about the CTEC building? Is that what it's called in Moses?
CB Tech, or is that what you're referring to? Okay, we can look in to see the availability of that. That's a good idea. Thank you. And if someone comes up with something else, please let me know, and I'll shoot an email to Chris or say, hey, why don't we check this out to see availability. You know, and once we do that, of course, we'll have to check the calendars or agenda of the moderator to make sure that everything is open and accessible to all of us. Okay, moving on. We have the selection of a new legislative rep. This is something that I apologize, I've just put on the back burner, and I think you folks have heard me say before, COVID-19 is no longer an excuse. This was just something that hasn't been done. So we want to elect a new legislative rep tonight. I will read a short statement. A legislative representative serves as the board's liaison with the Washington State School Directors Association Legislative Assembly. The legislative representative will assume office July 1st in an even year for a 2-year period. The legislative representative will attend Washington State School Directors Association assemblies, conveying local views and concerns to that body and participating in the formulation of state legislative programs. The legislative representative will monitor proposed school legislation and inform the board of the issues. Having said that, I would like to nominate Jen Stevens as our legislative representative if she's up to it, or if she'd like to.
It's Stevenson.
I'm sorry, did I say Stevens? Stevenson, please forgive me.
I second that, Mike.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, we have a motion to select Jen Stevenson as our legislative rep for the next 2 years. We have a second as well. All in favor, aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, Director Stevenson. I appreciate the hard work and all the information you bring to the board. Thank you very much. Last bullet on there is OHS and DOHS graduation. Someone kick in and enlighten me.
I just want to say, for having a very unusual year and graduation, I think that the amount of work that went into both of these graduations and the individuals that did it, I just want to say thank you. I think that they were both amazing under the circumstances. I think it was fun to see families a lot more involved and cars being decorated and all kinds of that kind of stuff under the circumstances. And I more than anything, I just want to say hats off to all of those that spent a ton of time planning and preparing and putting up banners and painting backdrops and balloon tunnels. That's not what they're called. Anyways, just there was amazing amount of work and cooperation that went into those things. And I just want to say thanks. It would be interesting if we had to know like what the numbers are for both campuses, and if we know like our 4-year graduation rates and that kind of stuff. If that's available, that would be great to know.
So we do have a couple of people that's working on those numbers that you share with us, Jen. We'll get that to the board as soon as we get that information.
Wonderful, thank you. I know that in the newspaper, it said for Desert Oasis that because graduation was delayed and the students were able to do some summer school, there were 11 more graduates that were able to graduate with the graduation and the rest of the class because of that delay. Not an ideal thing, but I mean, that's a lot to have just for that short of a delay. That's great. So, yay.
I did the DOHS graduation ceremony, and I just have to put out a kudos to Mr. Tovar and his staff, because they did a wonderful job there. And the students too. There was actually 26 graduates, and we had 24 show up for the graduation. And it was a wonderful night, and it was just really nice, and it was exciting to see some of the parents, and you could tell how proud they were of their scholars and the students graduating, and it was just really, really heartwarming, and it was really nice to see.
I'll piggyback on both of those comments and say a huge thank you to Pete and the entire committee that works so arduously and relentlessly on this. I want to say a thank you to the community of Othello, the parents of our graduates, for their time and effort. I want to say kudos to the board members for all of us participating and being there for our allotted times. And it was great to see, like Jen says, the creativity that went into decorating the cars. It was good to see the smiles. It really, once again, brought to the forefront the resiliency of Othello. despite the conditions of graduation and what we had to do. Although not ideal, I think we were able to give everyone at least a sense of graduation, something that they can remember, a photographic image, and hopefully soon here a video of it all. Again, thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to the community, to the graduates of OHS and DHS. Kudos to you guys. Hats off. Best of luck in your future endeavors. We can't wait to see all the great things that's going to come out of your guys' future. Make us proud. Go out there and show the world what Othello's made of. Thank you very much, everyone that was involved with that. Moving on to item B3. Elise and Lauren, not sure if you guys have reports tonight. If you do, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi everybody. I really don't have anything to share, sadly. I'm mostly just here for the discussion and to know what's going on so I can tell my peers.
Was that Elise?
No. Hi, it's Lauren. Elise was unable to make it tonight.
All right. Thank you for that, Lauren. Appreciate you being here and representing and trying to get information to take back to your peers. Thank you very much. Moving on to item C1, I will entertain a motion for the approval of required approvals tonight.
I have some questions maybe before we get to the approvals or to the motions. I had a few different questions. Let me get to those. Under accounts payable, if you can, I don't know if we need to go to those this time, but if you want to pull those up, great. If not, that's fine. So I think I have like 3 different things that I wanted to ask about. Kennewick School District, we're paying $45,000. Can you give us some information about, I mean, we often pay other school districts different amounts, but what was that one for?
Let
Yeah,
Jeanette.
sorry. So the bill for Kennewick School District this month was for, so we're part of a STEM kit cooperative, basically. And so it's elementary science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics kits. And so a couple years ago, they went through the process and basically revamped all of their kits. And so there was a pretty significant cost to that. And so everyone who was in the interlocal and cooperative agreement for those kits pitched in to help cover the cost of the big upgrade. And so this is our last payment for that.
Okay. University of Washington, $13,500.
I'm trying to find your.
Oh, 650, sorry.
Let me get down to. I will have to look that one back up. I can't.
You can't see the whole name, but it looks like it might be continuing. Is this, I just want to confirm if this is like for college in the classroom classes?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. And do you know, is that like a year or is that a semester?
I believe that was for, I don't know off the top of my head, actually.
Okay, I'm
for
sorry.
that one, because different colleges bill differently.
Right, whether it's a pre-bill or a post-bill or something like that, right, I'm sure.
Well,
But that,
yeah, it's definitely
Right.
a post bill.
okay,
So all of those credits were completed. So they're for dual credits for students.
okay, that makes sense. And then to go down to the capital budgets. There's one for King County directors for 23 capital projects. Yeah, King County directors for 23,000. Can you give an explanation as to that one?
Yes, so that is for the portables that are coming to McFarland campus later this fall. And so they are billing us as they're working and ordering materials and things like that. So they're billing us monthly for that. And so that is actually the first bill for the portables. So they're working on them slowly.
Perfect. Just to understand that we're in the process, and when we get small ones along the way, or that's not small, but them along the way, that we understand why. So
it's smaller than the ones coming soon.
I'm sure much smaller than the soon coming ones. I'm ready to, unless there's any other questions, I'm ready to propose we approve the required approvals.
So do you motion Director Stevenson to approve required approvals?
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Stevenson, and I believe Director Johnson beat Director Prowse. Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item C2, superintendent informational items. And Chris, I will just turn it over to you.
Yes, I believe we have Scott Swartz on the mic with us, and we just want to take the opportunity to present him to the board and also to the public as the new interim principal of Othello High School. We're honored to have Scott. We all know him, but he's on the mic, and we're going to ask Scott if you have a few words to share with us.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to thank you, Dr. Hurst, Pete Perez, and Sandra Villarreal for having the confidence and faith in me to allow me to in this position for interim principal at Othello High School. I'd also like to thank the board as well for having their confidence. I'm very grateful and honored to be able to be selected for this position. I'm excited for the upcoming school year and all the challenges that it might bring. You know, we're kind of in an interesting year this year, so I'm looking forward to those challenges and conquering those. I'm also looking forward to working with OHS staff and in a different capacity than I have been the last few years. Again, just want to say thank you for this amazing opportunity.
Thank you very much, Scott. I wanted to ask the board of directors if you had any questions on C2 through 4 before we go into updates and reentry plan. If not, we're going to ask if Talia could bring up the COVID-19 updates. On the first slide, we would like to just bring to everyone's attention, the board and the public, just a few things. What we did is we had taken a few of the slides from the presentation from Dr. Bresney last week, in which several of the district office personnel had attended via Zoom. This is one of the slides, and it really portrays a picture of where we are across the state. One of the things I want to point out is at the very top, you see a sentence, the second sentence that says, the Department of Health defines low disease activity as having fewer than 25 cases per 100,000 people during the prior 2 weeks. So that is key. So I want you to remember 25 cases. So as we think about what is the metric that the state is looking at, that's the key indicator right there, 25 cases. Not only the state, but each county. There is a formula that each county looks at, but it has to equate to fewer than 25 cases per 100,000. And I'll talk you through that in a second. When you look at the diagram or the picture of Washington State, you can see in the darker color, red or auburn, you'll see that certainly Adams County has exceeded the 25 cases In fact, if you look at the legend, you'll see that we are in the category of 75 or more. And I would say that we are substantially more than 75 cases over the prior 2 weeks period in Adams County. If you look over to the left, I want you to take note of where we are as a state. So the rate per 100,000 as a state, this is new diagnosed cases for the prior 2 weeks. So remember, we're looking at increments of 2 weeks. As a state, this was as of June the 17th, was 83. So did we meet our goal of fewer than 25? The answer is no, as a state during that time. So this is what I would like to share with you for those who are certainly interested in how they came up, or Washington State came up with that 83. What you really do is you look at the confirmed cases. So across the state, you'll see that there's 6,260 confirmed cases. You notice also that it's per 100,000. So if you want to calculate this, you take 6,260 times 100,000. That'll give you 626 million. And then you look at our population of the state, which is 7,550,000. So you take that 626 million, you divide it by 7.55 million. That's where they come up with the rate of 83. That's the calculation. The answer is still no, we did not meet the 25 cases or less. Next slide. And again, in Dr. Bresney's presentation, he looked at the next window. So through July the 4th, same calculation, 7,699 times 100,000. And you divide that by our population, 7.55 million. That gives you the 102. So that is the rate. So of course, during that period as well, we did not meet the goal of fewer than 25 cases per 100,000. Next slide. That brings us closer to where we are now. However, that's the next window that Dr. Bresney shared with us. Again, you can see the confirmed cases for the prior 2 weeks. Again, across the state was 9,196. Multiply that by 100,000 and then divide that by the population, 7.55 million. That's where they come up with 121.9. So the answer is no. During that window, the state of Washington did not meet the goal of fewer than 25 cases per 100,000. Next slide. So this is important for everyone to understand, the board as well. EPI curve is just short for epidemic curve. Epidemic curve just simply shares where we are over time in Adams County. Specifically, for this particular curve, it relates to the number of positive cases per day in Adams County. Just a note, if you look at the very bottom, and you can see starting at June the 28th, and if you kind of move your finger up, you can see the number of cases. And then every date, you can see a line. You can clearly see from March all the way through July, especially from June, late June to July, you can see that spike in the number of positive cases per day. If you look at from June the 28th through July the 11th, which gives you a 2-week window, we had 93 positive cases during that 2-week window. So again, if you wanted to figure that out yourself, you can see what the rate is. We don't need to go through the calculation. If you go to the next slide, you can actually see the calculation. So here, you can see the orange line represents the goal for Adams County. Again, for those who really want to understand the metric that the state is looking at, but specifically the county, the metric is the same, it's 25, so fewer than 25 cases. As you can see, we had a rate of 555, so that is the rate. And again, because Adams County is way less than 100,000, you have to do the mathematical calculation. That's how they come up with the 555. Here's what I want to share with the board and with those listening. What that really means for Adams County, and especially Othello, if you really want to look at how do we get to the next phase, specifically this plays into the presentation you're going to hear from Pete and the teaching and learning team and what they're going to be presenting to the board. In order for us to go to the next phase, my calculations share that we can have no more than 5 confirmed cases over a period of 2 weeks. And again, that calculation is just performed by taking our population for Adams County, which is roughly 20,000, and looking at the rate that the state wants us to have and multiply by that, which is 25. 20 times 25, 20,000 times 25 gives you 100,000, or 500,000, sorry. And you divide that by 100,000, and that gives you your 5. That's where that number is coming from. So if you want to think about what we need to do as a community, as a learning community, as a city, we really have to listen to what Dr. Bresney is saying, the Department of Health is saying with his recommendations, which leads to the next slide. So it's very clear in that meeting that with our trajectory for Adams County, we have to look as a community, and we really have to, looking at bullet number 3, we really have to look at our masking policies, our social distancing policies, and looking at other restrictions. What do we have to do as a community to move forward, to move to the next phase? Again, my calculations, that means over a 2-week period, it has to be no more than 5 confirmed cases. Dr. Bresney was also very clear that with our trajectory right now, there's no way that we could open with a traditional setting or with a blended model. And again, I share this with you because it plays into the presentation that you're going to be hearing directly after. I know there's been many questions by constituents to our board members about what is the metric that we're looking at. And what I wanted to do is just share with you in detail, this is the metric, this is how they're calculating that rate for us. And in order for us to move from an online model to even thinking about a blended or traditional model, we really have to look together as a community and bring that number down to 5 or fewer cases over a 2-week period. Next slide. So I think that is it. Does the board have any questions regarding to what I just shared with you around the COVID-19 updates and the metrics?
So I just want to confirm it's about new cases. It's not about how many we've had accomplish, getting into past, or how many, what our hospital abilities are, or how many deaths. It's about how many new cases we're getting. So it's on new data. It has nothing to do with the old stuff, new data. Okay.
You're absolutely right, Jen. Just to reiterate, it's based on a 2-week window, and it's the new confirmed cases during that 2-week window. That's what we're looking at. So we have a time to get it right, to work together as a community. You're absolutely right.
Chris, my question is more, I realize Dr. Bresney is the one you had your presentation with. Is this an Inslee directive to the 25 caseload per 2 weeks? Is it something that is pertinent to Adams County? Where does that number come from? Because I know a lot of the people that are hearing disagree, to be blunt here, disagree with the metrics being utilized, disagree with the methodology, disagree with the reporting of deaths and everything else that's gone on. Conspiracy theories or not, there's reports of unused tests coming back positive. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So is this a directive from the governor to the counties to even remotely think about letting a traditional or a blended model happen?
Thank you for the question, Mike. This is absolutely from the CDC, the Center of Disease and Control. So they're guiding our actions. So that metric is being used by the Center of Disease Control, and it's being used nationally. So it's not just arbitrary to the state of Washington. It's not just arbitrary to Adams County. It's across our nation. So from CDC. Also, we certainly have been instructed, we being districts across the state, superintendents across the state, we have been instructed to work with our Department of Health locally, but also looking at the CDC guidelines. So those are coming from CDC, but also being reiterated by Governor Inslee and also being reiterated by OSPI, our state superintendent.
To me, that's interesting because if I'm not mistaken, I saw a report this weekend where CDC recommends that kids go back to school. And they're just adding to this confusion. The narrative changes daily. I thought that that's kind of where the information was coming from, but then I read the CDC, the one recommending the importance of kids going back to school because of the social emotional component to their lives, their behaviors, their attitudes, and things of that nature. But I appreciate the information. At least I can. I know where the calculation comes from now. I had no idea that was what was utilized, but I do appreciate the information.
Any other questions from the board members? If not, again, taking all that information I just shared with you in consideration, we're going to turn over to Pete and the teaching and learning team to walk us through the reentry plan.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Hurst. I do want to take a moment just to step back to the graduation conversation. I think it ties into the activity we're about to engage in here. It's, you know, when tough things happen in the school district, we have lots of quality folks and leaders who step up. And I think particularly around graduation and the fine event that they put together, it's important that we recognize Mandy Perez and a parent group that she put together and organized. She also happens to be one of our instructional coaches. The counseling staff at Othello High School, particularly Jen Simmons, who provided excellent leadership around an unusual event. And OHS had a ton of staff volunteers come out and put together a fine event. Also at DOHS, I know Principal Tovar and his counselor, Priscilla Tovar, Paula Reno, the team over there did an excellent job as well. And so when we're dealt with unusual circumstances, we have good people that can step in and do the work. And related to the challenge that we're facing now, President Garza's comment about the CDC, and certainly the headline was, we need to open schools. And that is present in the CDC guidelines, the revised guidelines. But when you comb through the document, it also says very clearly that when disease levels are at a high level, you should not open schools. And the information that was shared by the local health officials and that Dr. Hurst just shared with the community and with the board, that's reflected in what the CDC says. Open up if you can, if it's safe, and if your local health officials tell you it's safe. So what we're going to present tonight is we're bringing a hopeful attitude and saying what's the best that could happen, what's the best outcome for our students and our staff. That came from a series of conversations we had across the district following the last board meeting. We had an opportunity to engage in sessions through Zoom with each of the sites led by their principals and assistant principals. We've also had follow-up conversations with OEA leadership, Lauren Jensen and Chad Smith. Also had an opportunity to connect with Minnie Castro, president of PSE, and her team. Consistent meetings with our administrators across the district and teacher leadership teams who are contributing to all of the hard work that's going on behind the scenes. And I'm hopeful that what we'll share with you is the best thinking around our context and what's happening in our community. And certainly would welcome questions throughout the presentation. I don't think there's a need to wait for the end of what could be a lengthy conversation. Next slide, please. I do want to take the opportunity to remind the board and perhaps those watching who did not tune in to our last session that really our goal is to open up in the least restrictive environment, doing the best we can to open up as close to traditional as possible. Our strategy from the jump has been to focus on a blended approach. How do we prepare for some face-to-face if social distancing requirements don't allow for complete enrollment? and how do we prepare for the online pieces that live in a blended model. Certainly a significant amount of work went into what the Department of Health calls non-pharmacological interventions, putting those in place. Things like the masks and the social distancing, sanitizing and those kinds of activities, all new for many of us that are educators by trade and haven't had to deal with those sorts of circumstances. All of that work was done under local and regional and state guidance, and it's really been a collaborative approach to solving a very complex problem. And we shared with the board last time and with the community that our next step was to review that plan with the Department of Health. And they've certainly given us positive feedback on what we shared about our blended approach. But they were also very clear with us that the current disease levels in our community are just too high, or we're not going to have an opportunity to open in a blended model if the numbers are at the end of August what they are today. And so it will be up to our community to determine how we respond to that, and if we are willing to take the steps to bring those numbers down to where they were in March, when certainly we were living in a more restricted time. So what we want to share with you tonight, next slide, please, Delia. We want to give you a little bit of an update about where we're at and that what we've heard from our community since our last meeting. Certainly had excellent attendance and participation from our staff at each of the building sessions, and we have more of those scheduled starting tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. So we'll re-engage with all of our sites over the next 2 or 3 days. And I do want to reiterate that the blended approach is approved by the Department of Health as developed, if we're able to get all those supports in place. But that level of community transition and where we're at now is substantial and uncontrolled and not controlled. And so working closely with those local health officials, we have to make a decision on whether or not we can maintain school operations. And so if the community transmission is what it is right now, school closure is an important consideration that the CDC recommends. And we are required to plan for virtual learning, which would have to be in place in the event of a school closure. And that's really what we'll be sharing this evening. How do we plan for a virtual learning environment? We are certainly more fortunate than other districts who don't have the one-to-one devices out across their systems and their communities. And so the folks that are wrestling with that problem, who don't have a device in every child's hand, I'm sure are struggling mightily with this decision. But certainly that gives us some benefit, and I think something that should be recognized, the investment that the board and the community made in devices for every one of our students. Next slide, please. This is a reminder for the board and perhaps new for some folks in the room and on Zoom that we are approaching this in 3 instructional models. And what we're really asking the board to approve tonight in our planning is all 3 models based on where we're at the time in our collaboration with Department of Health officials. So if the numbers are good, everybody wants to come back in a traditional way. Everybody wants to be back in those classrooms. We know that's what's best for our students and our staff. If the numbers improve from where they are today, we can come back in a blended approach. And the Department of Health says we've prepared for that. We have excellent strategies in place, and we'd be safe to open up our schools. Being what the numbers are today, if they continue to be at such a high level in our community, we will have to consider and move towards an online environment. And I think it's important that everyone understands that the choice isn't about online schooling or schooling as it was pre-pandemic. It's really a choice between online schooling and a shell of the version of what we had before. And that I think we can all agree, at least on this, that there really is not an ideal solution. It's really just a series of Band-Aids on a broken system. And our system is being challenged right now. And I'm confident in the people that are working on putting it together and our entire staff who are ready to do what's best for kids. But it is a very, very challenging time in public ed. And so I want to share with you where we're at about the online components, but I did want to pause for a moment and see if there were any follow-up questions about the blended presentation that we shared a couple of weeks ago.
I'm sorry, I don't actually have a question about the blended, but you had said because of our current metrics. So it sounds like once our metrics, once we get that below that 25 threshold for our community, which is 5 people in 2 weeks, period of time, new cases, how often is the district, are we able to re-look at and go, what are our numbers now? I mean, are we looking at monthly? Are we looking at once a quarter saying, okay, now our numbers are good enough. Let's try to go back. I just want there to be consistency, but not so often that we're changing back and forth for teachers and for students, but so that we have some kind of we're doing this every such and such a time, very defined. How often are we able to look at our metrics and change what our model is?
Yeah, I think the important piece of that question is this idea about consistency and preparation. So we're going to look at the metrics daily. I think we're going to be in constant communication with the Department of Health. I'm hopeful that we'll be celebrating with the community as the numbers trend down, and say that if we can hit this benchmark, we're going to open the doors again and bring everybody back. I would want to say that as a system, we really need to think carefully about some of the natural breaks that occur in schools. So if we open up at the end of August and we say, we're going to give it a good go for 4 weeks, see where the numbers are. And if there's a natural break, if there's a 3-day weekend, if there's a holiday coming up, that we identify those frequent breaks that occur in a traditional school calendar and say, we're ready to move. And really the whole idea, what supports that idea is this concept of the blended approach. It's this ability to transition between those models. But I think in the interest of consistency, we want to be certain that when we make a jump to one of the less restrictive models, that the system is really prepared. So we don't shake up the students again. We don't shake up the staff. We want to be really sure that we're ready to go. And I guess if you're asking my opinion, we wouldn't say on a Friday that Monday we're coming back full bore. We'd say, let's take a couple days. And I imagine trying to look into the future a bit, transitioning from online to traditional, it's going to be phased, much like we did when we were shut down. They shut us down in phases, and we'll open up that way as well and look for natural breaks in the school calendar. But I don't think we'd be locked in and committed to a particular quarter or semester. Certainly those considerations would be a bit different at the secondary level. We want to talk a little bit about that and what makes sense if we start in an online model, particularly for our 9-12 students.
Okay, so then the follow-up question is, so let's say we feel like we're ready and we go back and we've been back for, let's say, 3 weeks, and then the numbers spike again or go up enough that we're over the 25 threshold again. Then do we go back to online? Is there a specific, if that's the standard we're looking at, then once that number's hit again, do we go back?
Yeah, I think we would go back. And what happened in the spring, we know, is we had 3 days to move to an online format, and districts across the country struggled with that sort of crisis move. I think we certainly will be much better prepared in the fall. And again, I think we really want to be careful for the experience that we're going to create for students in particular, coming back and forth. Some of the draft guidance that was shared by the Department of Health last week, they're working on the type of outbreak that might happen in a particular site that would require the closing of a cohort or the closing of an entire school. But those numbers in a community our size, if we hit those thresholds at one school, it sounds like we'd be above the 25 per 100,000. And I imagine we would have to shut down the whole system if that's the metric that the Department of Health required. In larger communities, based on the guidance that I heard, if you had 2 students in a particular cohort test positive, that cohort would be out for 14 days. And if you had 2 cohorts at an individual school site test positive, the school would be shut down for 2 weeks. In our community, in that particular scenario, that would be 4 positive cases, putting us really, really close to that 5 in the 2-week window.
I'm sorry, when you say cohort, can you define what that means? Cohort, like per grade? Or
absolutely.
What?
So what the Department of Health has asked us to do is imagine you have a student at Hiawatha and they're in 2nd grade. The 10 or 20 kids, whatever model we're in, that can be safely housed in that classroom, that's a cohort. So if a couple of students in that classroom tested positive, that classroom would be shut down. If we had 2 classrooms at that site, the entire site would be shut down. And that's the draft guidance that the Department of Health is working on. So I shared in that sense, but those are the kinds of numbers that they're talking about sharing with schools across the country.
But
Okay.
you're also saying that if we have at least 5 district-wide, it will shut down the district.
Yeah, I don't think the 25 is a hard, it's a 25 per 100,000 is my understanding of the number. So that number for Othello is much smaller. We only have 20,000 residents that count in our metrics. So again, back to this scenario, the Department of Health shares out these broad ideas about disease levels, and certainly in a community like Spokane, where you have many thousands of students, or in public schools on the western side of the state, those numbers are much greater. And so I guess you could shut down a particular grade level or a particular school site. In our community, being small allows us to be more mobile, but certainly the metrics are much more impactful in a community our size.
So just to be clear, Pete, because all this can be kind of confusing, if 5 people in the city of Othello test positive, will we shut down the school?
That's my understanding of the current metrics, yes.
Okay, just wanted to be clear on that.
5 people over a 2-week period, right?
That's the way the Department of Health is explaining the current standard and current metrics, yes.
That
But I think
sounds so small for a community our size. I mean, big, especially when we came out with 40 today. So okay. Sorry, Lindsay, go.
I've been approached by some teachers asking if there were teachers that were willing to sign a waiver and students willing to sign a waiver to go to school in person, releasing liability towards the district or whatever. Is that option, and why or why not could that work?
Yeah, I think that's a question I've fielded from a couple of folks. And what I've tried to share with people across these conversations is I think it's important that when you are dealt an unusual circumstance or something you haven't dealt with before, you consider the systems or structures you already have in place in your organization. So in our organization, if we had been challenged before with something that our liability folks, our insurance folks said, I would not recommend that the district do that. We would probably say, okay, we're not going to do it. And I think we would want to approach it in a similar way here. Would the board, based on what we do typically with all situations that we face in our organization, would we sign off on that? Would we say that's an okay thing to do? So I think that's really a question certainly for our legal counsel, but also for the board to consider. I guess if you're asking me personally, it's not a recommendation that I would make to the board, or that I've heard our principals share as a viable option.
Just to clarify for the community, when we talk about shutting down the district, if there are 5 or more cases, that means we would go back to a fully online model, correct? Like, let's say we were able to start in a blended method, and then we had more than 5 cases, then we would go to fully online from there.
Yes, the term shutdown, as it has been used over the last several months, when it happened in the springtime, there just wasn't the professional expertise or the opportunity to pivot towards a full online model in our community, in our district. We certainly will be prepared for that in August if we have to start that way. And the expectation would be that whatever infrastructure we put in place to start in an online format, we'd be able to pivot right back to that if we were forced to.
Okay. I have one more question. Sorry. So as far as our special education students, is there a way that we can do online learning for students without that don't have special education requirements, and then do an in-person educating for our special needs students? Is that something that's even an option? I just know online learning for kids with special needs is next to impossible, and so I'm just curious about that demographic in our school district and how we can best accommodate their needs.
Yeah, excellent question. It's certainly an option, and I think more specifically an expectation that we consider our students with special needs, and are we able to meet their individualized education plans in an online format. And for many of those, that would be a very difficult hill to climb. In the spring, when we were all in shelter in place, the schools were closed. You could not use the facility. I think where we're at now, certainly as a state, we've learned more about how to appropriately deal with some of the factors that the disease has thrown our way. But our expectation is that our facilities will be open. We will have some students there in a limited capacity. And specifically, it would be right now our special education students. But I know there are some creative ideas being thought about out there by many of our teachers saying, how do we engage with students who are struggling to participate? How do we reach out to some of those groups that have other factors that don't allow them to engage in an online format? And unless we're in shelter in place, those would be options for our community.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next slide, please, Talia. Well, this will be a new information for the board and for most folks in our system and in our community. We've landed on a series of OSD distance learning standards, and these are taken from benchmarking, which is researching and visiting and looking at what other systems across the country are doing. And certainly there are school districts in our state that are doing outstanding work in preparing for a distance learning model. And we also wanted to be really mindful of what fits our context here in Othello. And so there are 8 standards that I want to share with you tonight. I'll go through each of them and take the time to read them so the community has an opportunity to hear those, and then take questions from the board, perhaps at the end of the slide. And there'll be 2 slides that detail the OSD distance learning standards. And I think it's important that you think about the context that we were living in the spring and some of the challenges we had, and really why we think it's important that we establish the learning standards, but also provide the training for our staff and our families to make sure that they can meet those standards. The first one is around daily live interaction, and that's going to be a requirement that we have. We certainly want teachers to have an opportunity to connect with their students every day, and that could be through live instruction and or following up and checking in on that. And really that standard is around engagement. We struggled with engagement as a system, as a state, and across the country. Students had a hard time with the transition last year. So that's really number one for us, some sort of interaction in a consistent format with our teachers. The next standard is around taking attendance. The state of Washington gave us incredible flexibility last year in dealing with attendance. I'm sure the board is quite aware that FTE and funding for schools is really driven by student attendance. And in this online format, student participation is going to be linked to that FTE. And so we're going to have a way that we're monitoring participation. And for some students, that'll be actual taking attendance that they engaged in the session that day, but also the time value of the work that was assigned. So this concept of do no harm that the state shared last spring, that's no longer the scenario. That's no longer the system that we're working under. There certainly will be an expectation of student participation, and we're going to have to make sure they have the skills and resources to attend regularly. Related to instruction, certainly the best practices across the country and recommendations for online learning. Last year, we started with that baseline model, and you can think back to the minutes of instruction that we asked our teachers and our families to engage in. Many of them had difficulty meeting that standard. And so we're currently working with our principals and our assistant principals and their leadership teams. They're coming up with daily schedules for this online format. And I know that the excellent work for the leadership teams at the individual sites, they're going to prepare something that is much more robust and rigorous than what we had in the springtime. So those details will be coming out. And then related to serving students in need, this gets back to Director Prowse's question, particularly about our special ed students. What are the accommodations that we're going to be able to make for students on an IEP or 504, and perhaps those needing support with basic needs. And in the current modeling, small cohorts of students would be able to attend in a more traditional model. So those are the first 4 of the distance learning standards we're going to ask our teams to wrestle with and deal with. So I would take questions from the board around those if there are any.
So I have a question about instruction and the daily live interaction required. I guess they kind of go together. If we as a board approve, I I mean, we're approving all of it, but we know that distance learning is going to have to be what happens. Is there a way to engage teachers that are ready and willing to do trainings now instead of waiting till their contract time, and without giving direction for the operation side of things to possibly pay them?
Yep, I think as we share the standards, I think it sounds like we're in alignment around the level of professional learning that we're all going to need around this new model. You're going to hear at the end of the presentation some of the potential fiscal impact related to this transition. And certainly we would ask the board to consider, how do we supplement what we offer in a traditional school year, which in this context would be the week of August 17th. We have dedicated those 5 days to professional learning for our staff. But the model has always been and will continue to be that those are well attended and participation levels are high, but they are voluntary. Certainly, we are in a position to offer additional training, but the board should understand that those days have a significant impact on the bottom line. And so we would certainly come to the board with a plan, and you need to understand that there would be a price tag for that work for sure, but we're ready to do it.
Okay. So you're saying potential payment and starting learning before the 17th. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'm saying we could start tomorrow if we knew what the budget was. So that the expertise in the system, particularly at the teacher level, we have a lot of folks who have stepped up and volunteered to share their expertise. We have some
Okay.
folks from outside the system and others at the central office that are going to lead that work. So I think the want to is there. It's a matter of getting confirmation from the board that we're going to get a good return on our investment. And certainly it's also going to involve a conversation with OEA and PSC about what we're offering their members and what our expectations are for participation in the training and after the training. So it's not
Okay.
as simple as say, let's go tomorrow, but I know the desire is there. And if that's the direction that the board sends us, we're ready to go.
Okay. I mean, and not mandatory, but if they want compensation and they want training right away to get started, then you're saying that that's going to be an option that you're exploring. And those that want to wait until the 11th hour or until their contract states they have to participate, that's an option as well.
Correct. We won't violate the CBA.
Okay. Thank you.
Pete, I just want to make a clarification on the daily live interaction. I know that some colleges are requiring their students to be on a Zoom call like we are on for the entirety of the class time. Is that what you guys have in mind with the daily live interaction, or are you doing it do you have something else in mind?
Yeah, that would be a component of it, but that would not be the singular model. You should imagine that there might be I'm going to share what a day might look like for a teacher or a student, but it could be checking in on a Zoom session. It could be what we're calling office hours, where a teacher's going to be in the room for an hour, and any kid who wants to pop in and ask a question. And in that situation, it might be that your child, Lindsay, you get a phone call at home or a talking points text that says, "Hey, we haven't heard from you in a couple of days. I need you to check in on this Zoom. Are you available?" And if you respond and check in on the Zoom, that's a daily live interaction. And we're also going to talk about our restructuring of some of our human resource manpower to support the consistent communication, which will be shared in following standards. But it wouldn't necessarily mean that you would have a third grader sitting on a Zoom session from 8:15 to 2:45. I don't think that's healthy for them or for the teacher for that matter.
That was kind of my question, because the daily live interaction, I could see it would be a lot easier for the higher grades, but how about from K to 3? How's that going to work with that daily? You're going to have some parents that are fully committed with this too.
Yeah, and so if you'll allow me, we'll get through the next slide to describe some of the additional standards, and then Director Johnson, I'm going to describe what a day might look like K6, and then what it might look like 712. And if you don't get an answer there or enough clarity around it, certainly would entertain more questions. But just looking ahead in the presentation, we'll get to that and certainly take some more questions at that point. If that's okay. Okay, the next slide is our Talia, if you'd go to the next one, please. Oh, nope, you're there. So this idea about the requirements for live instruction tied to the standard up above, we're going to come up with this weekly expectation of synchronous or live instruction. So what we're doing now is synchronous. We're all in the room at the same time, engaging in a conversation. And we really think that that standard needs to be informed and developed by our teacher teams. And so it's going to be really important that our principals go back and hear from their staff and their leadership teams about the stamina that our students are going to have to display to participate in an online environment. So that will that's one of our standards, but it's in development. We certainly need teacher feedback around that. This other concept about preventing disengagement, we need to come up with a solid plan to re-engage students who are absent from distance learning. So not only absent, perhaps not checking in on the synchronous opportunities, but also not responding and submitting their activities, their assignments, their formative assessments. If those things aren't trickling in, we know that we're going to have to be on the phone. We're going to have to reach out in a consistent way. And we're going to have to, I would imagine it's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of calls per day from school sites, checking in on kids and making sure that they participate fully. So that will certainly be a different level of activity than we had in the spring. Certainly, I think you're aware that we've sent out an internet survey checking in on access for folks. And so that's going to be a key factor for us, thinking about what accommodations we might need to put in place. We've talked about farming out some of our buses with our hotspots on them. I know Rigo Ozuna, our director of technology, is working on creative ideas and trying to really get a good handle on who doesn't have high quality access. That will also become more clear as we open up our online registration and our face-to-face registration in the next week and a half. We'll have a good idea about that. But for those kids who aren't able to connect, what are we going to do around what we did last year in the packet idea? How do we make that more meaningful and more consistent? But the goal is going to be that every kid can access our online learning components. And then the last one will be to track those engagement records. I know we heard a lot of anecdotal evidence about the springtime, not only in our district, but in others that said, kids didn't engage, families didn't participate, those kinds of things. But I really haven't seen any solid numbers, at least in our region or in our state, about what those numbers really were. So we're going to track that. We're going to see who's participating, who's not. We're going to think about those small cohorts if they aren't engaging, and thinking about how we can support them more fully so they can find success in an online environment. And those are the 8 learning standards that we wanted to share with the board and the community, and that we'll be sharing with teachers over the next several weeks. Any questions about those 4 standards?
So the live instruction, I have a little bit of a question on that. Okay, as a mom, one of my children gets on Zoom. This is how they participated in the spring. They would get on Zoom and one would just draw and one would just be present but not interacting. So neither of them really interacted, but they were logged on. I don't know are you determining if you get on, we're calling it good? Because I know in classrooms that, there's some stuff sinking in, they're just not actively showing that they're participating. Is if they log in, are you calling it good with that? Or is there they have to do such and such or something?
Yeah, I think the minimum will be that they check in and they sign in. We've learned a lot about online interactions. I think if you saw the start of this meeting, I had a screenshot up. I wasn't on the, you couldn't see me. I wasn't participating in the meeting, but I was there. I was signed in. There's lots of research out there about how you can more fully engage participants in an online setting. So we'll provide that kind of training for our teachers. We would expect that students would log in and participate. We would want to think through with teachers, how do you include everyone in the conversation? How to use some of the components in Zoom that allow for recognition and celebration. There's down in the participant area, there's a way to raise your hand, all those kinds of pieces. There are also some really creative tools that teachers will have access to foster that interaction amongst students in a Zoom setting. You can do that through breakout rooms and lots of other online tools that will facilitate that kind of conversation. But that's the kind of work that our teachers are going to need to prepare for. And it's a very different style of teaching. All of our folks signed up to be face-to-face traditional model instructors. And I think it's just important that we equip them with the tools. And some of them didn't have that experience last spring, and it wasn't their fault. It was an emergency situation. And I think by and large, our folks did really the best that they could under difficult circumstances. And it will be better in the fall, certainly.
Right. It was obvious that there were some definite rock stars and there were some that were struggling. So then with the connectivity thing, so it sounds like you're saying make accommodations, possibly packets, if online's not working or whatever. How will teachers and staff verify if a packet's being completed? I know that the packets in the spring, you didn't want them back.
Yeah, we didn't want them back, and I know there's some learning that's gone on certainly in the medical field around whether or not that's appropriate. So I think there are ways we can feel safe in collecting some of those items. And I was hesitant to use the term packets because that's not an ideal model for teachers, and it's certainly not an ideal model for students. But for a handful of our folks, that may be their only option. And so it's going to be important that we come up with a scenario where we can collect that work. We can give them feedback and we can let them move on to the next learning standard. But that should not be the standard. That should really be the exception. And I think the focus should be on how do we get enough students and families access so that they can participate online.
Okay, thank you. Those are mine.
Pete, I was just wondering, would the teachers be able to go into the school to use the whiteboards and the overhead projections while they're doing their online or distance teaching?
Yeah, in the current guidelines in our county and in our state, the schools are open for use. The guidelines in the spring were related to the shelter in place and the stay home, stay healthy order. So absolutely, they could come into our site. I think there are some advantages to being able to have access to all of your tools and resources. There's also some of our staff even struggle with having a reliable internet connection. Those kinds of things are available. Making hundreds and thousands of phone calls from district employee cell phones doesn't seem like an ideal model. So we're certainly going to need access to our infrastructure. And as of now, our sites would be open for staff to complete their tasks.
Thank you.
Pete, I'm kind of going to jump onto that question too, but I noticed it's kind of on your next slide where it lists teacher, student, under the pre-K instruction and student learning. The first one under the teachers is teachers work on site. Now, I've had a couple mention to me that saying that they do have to come in or wondering if they do have to come in and teach from their classroom, or is it still possible that they could still teach from, if they have all the materials, still teach from their living room or where they feel more comfortable and safe?
Yeah, that's a really common question we've been getting from all of the sites. And what we're putting out there is that the expectation is that teachers would be on site, and for some of the reasons that I outlined. Certainly the governor's guidelines also recommend telework when appropriate and when it can happen. And I think we would certainly want to be flexible and talk with folks about their specific needs and accommodations that might allow them to do telework from time to time. But we want it to be really straight and transparent with teachers and say, if it's safe to come to work and the tools and resources are here at the school site, that we would start with the expectation that it would be on site. And certainly with the understanding that there are some teachers and not just teachers, but also paras and other staff, support staff that have particular medical concerns that don't allow them to participate wholly. And that's a complicated human resource scenario right now. And so those individual situations are really being handled between the principals and our human resource office. But the expectation right now is that, that staff would be on site if it's safe to be on site.
What about the possibility, and maybe you haven't even discussed this yet, or this is a can of worms, of those teachers that are also parents to students in the district, or even not students in the district, to bring their children to their classroom with them. If the teacher is typically the one in the classroom, just to have, because I know that that's a question or an issue that has been brought up to me. Has that been a discussion yet, or is there a policy or a plan or thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's certainly been a discussion. I should have shared earlier that OEA submitted a series of questions to the district office, and there were certainly questions around childcare in that document. What I think we would want to consider as an organization, and it was something that the board would certainly have to weigh in on, is the level of liability that we're willing to take on. What's the risk reward of allowing someone who says, I can come to work and feel safe about it, but it would be convenient, and the best way for me to do it would be to bring my school-age child onto campus with me. Would you let me do that? I think some of those conversations are going to continue to happen between the district and OEA and PSE. So it certainly has been a conversation that has happened and will continue to happen over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. So no decisions yet, I'm hearing.
I think if we're talking about going back to that idea about what structures and systems did you have in place pre-pandemic, and how many of those inform your decision making and work can you rely on? In the pre-pandemic, people had to be on site to work. So that's where we're at today. Pre-pandemic, even your school-age children, they didn't get to come to work with you. But we know that there are different factors now, and so we would want to engage in that conversation, but we certainly haven't come to any agreement with our associations around that. But we have been having those conversations formally and informally around the topic. So, if we had to open tomorrow, you'd have to come to work, and childcare would not be on site.
Thank you just for clarifying. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. This is around instruction and student learning. And what's, I think, encouraging about this is the last time that we met, we talked for a couple of hours about safety issues and medical issues. And I think we're talking more and more tonight about teaching and learning, which is what our folks are best at. We present this slide in a similar context to the traditional blended and online models. Really, there's three categories we would ask the board and the community to think about. What are the expectations for our teachers? What are the expectations for our students? And then what are the expectations for our families? If we break down in one of these areas, then we know that our students are not going to find success. And layered into that are what are the supports that we're going to put in place to allow them to be successful. So this initial draft is built around expectations, PK, certainly with the understanding that a kinder student is very different than a fourth grader most of the time. And it was built off the best practices for distance learning. And so we share that content with you. I know the board's had it for a few days, and I don't mean to read it to you, but certainly would entertain any questions about, like the one Director Johnson brought up about teachers working on site, or some of those other expectations for students and parents that pop out at you.
Do you plan on having parent training sessions, or possibly like a parent teacher conferences right from the beginning of school, so that the parents' rules and supports, not rules, so the parents understand what we need for their children to get the most out of their own education, and how to support the parents? Has there been a discussion about how to train the parents to be that support at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we've discovered throughout this crisis, certainly we're all much better at Zoom and this online interaction than we were several months ago. And we found that it is a suitable opportunity to engage with folks. We found a lot of success last week in interacting with our school sites. We would expect to offer several sessions over the next few weeks for our community and our parents for a Q&A session, opportunities to train them and share with them some of the important pieces here. I've been engaged in conversations with our communications director, Ed Peterson, and I know Ed is really up to speed on media blasts to get information out there to folks. So we would also produce some videos that folks could go back to and interact with. We have certainly those things are in the works and ready to be launched. Additionally, I would say that there have been some really excellent ideas, particularly from some of our teachers at the elementary level, talking about a soft opening where we might spend a week where we bring in really small groups of kids or individual families, and we spend this. It would be almost like a conference style setting, but it would be a pre-conference, right? For that first week, you might come in and we're going to sit down with you and your child, and we're going to talk about Google Classroom. We're going to talk about the expectations for logging in. We're going to make sure you're connected, and we're going to get a really accurate phone number, and we're going to know how to stay in touch with each other. So lots of creative ideas out there amongst the teaching staff and the principals. And so they have some ideas for particularly around that parent piece to make sure that they get the support and the training that they're going to need so that their child can participate fully. So absolutely, those are in the works. And once the approval is given, if it's at this meeting or the next, we're ready to launch those events.
Awesome. Those are great ideas because I think that we all need to realize that this is not just a teacher or just a teacher and a para thing, that it's a community-wide thing that we all need to understand, and that the parents are just as much partners and a key for this to be functioning and effective as it is for the student and the teacher relationship. So I think that sounds wonderful. I'm glad that you're already trying to figure out how to accommodate those the best ways possible. Thank you.
All right, next slide, please, Talia. And this slide describes what a weekly schedule might look like for a PK through 6 student. Again, understanding for the board that this is a wide range of student skill and experience. But on Monday, we're going to ask our staff to put out the assignments. Here's where things are at. Here's what you need to do this week. I'm going to have a Zoom session, so checking for understanding, make sure everyone knows what the plan is, and this idea around social emotional learning. We're just going to check in with each other. We're going to go around the horn and make sure everyone's feeling supported and engaged. Perhaps the next day, I'd be I'd be reviewing my Google Classroom, checking in on my assignments, participating in those assignments and activities. And then on Wednesday, continuing with that process, making sure that I engage daily in an activity. Maybe my teacher's going to schedule a Zoom session that day to check in. They might have their office hours established, and I check in with my small group or individually. And it might even be whole group instruction that my teacher plans for that day. On Thursday, I'd be making sure that I got my work done. Hopefully my family's engaging with me as well, making sure that I'm making progress. And there might be another Zoom session on a particular area that I'm struggling in, or some extra support that I've scheduled because my teacher was reaching out, checking in on me. Friday, I want to make sure I got everything done and continue with my process and get ready for the next week, knowing that throughout that calendar week, that typical week, that I'm having opportunities to engage in a daily way with someone from the school site. And it might be just a shared Google Doc where a teacher's providing feedback on something they've asked me to submit. It might be a quick text from my teacher that went to the entire class saying, if you need help, I'll be on Zoom from 9 to 10, and then again from 2 to 3. That kind of communication and interaction is what we would ask that our students would expect PK 6. All right. This is a bit of a transition here, but I wanted to stick at the K-6 level for now, understanding that that certainly impacts our middle and high schools, and it still impacts them, but not as significant a manner based on number of staff. And this is certainly a long list of individuals, valuable folks that work in our system. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a long list that's representative of folks that support learning in our schools. And I think it's important that the board and the community understands, and we've shared with our associations, that the duties are going to change to support the distance learning standards. There are some folks that don't have classrooms assigned to them, and we're just going to need support around, and I'll just highlight some of the standards. And this concept of taking student attendance. It's not as simple as checking a box or having the student say here. It really is about checking in on them daily. And are there ways some of our support staff can make sure that that happens? And certainly we would identify that as meaningful, helping students stay engaged. Serving students in need, perhaps there will be a need to provide additional accommodations, small group Zoom sessions, small sessions on campus, those kinds of activities. So we would ask that these folks will be considered for some of that meaningful work around serving specific student need. Checking in on families and how we're going to get wireless access to some of our folks that aren't able to make that happen. We're looking at some creative ideas and partnerships with Marion Shade, our Director of Transportation, and her staff. They have certainly demonstrated a willingness to go above and beyond in their support of our food service delivery. And this is another creative idea that we've been going back and forth with Marion, and she's certainly willing at every turn to help out the teaching and learning folks. So we're thinking about ways we can use our staff to support that. And then these ideas about weekly engagement records so that kids don't fall through the cracks. So kids who aren't checking in don't go a week or 10 days without having any contact from the school district. We are fortunate to have lots of folks in our system to support the learning. And these will be some learning support activities that are different than a traditional model, but are going to be very, very important in an online learning environment.
So just to confirm, every person that's employed is still going to stay employed.
Yeah, the model that we've been operating under is, that transitioning between a blended and online and traditional approach is certainly not any less work. In fact, it's been more work for folks. Additionally, this is, I'll give you a worst case scenario, trying to be optimistic this evening, but we've known for years we've had a bus driver shortage. And if we told 10 bus drivers we didn't need them for 3 months, and then after that 3-month period, we need them back, some of them may not be around. So I think it's being really strategic in how do we maintain and keep people engaged in meaningful work. And I have really appreciated Lauren Jensen and Chad Smith for OEA and Minnie Castro for PSE, their willingness to engage in those conversations about how duties might have to be altered and changed in the interest of keeping everybody on staff, knowing that we need the support right now. And so, yes, that's absolutely the intent. But as we all have become aware over the last several months, things change rather quickly based on the state providing recommendation or circumstances change in the system. But absolutely our intent is to find meaningful work for everyone who's been engaged in the system. The next slide is really about a 7-12 experience. We know that I've had some conversations with Jessica Schenk and her staff over at McFarland. They had a leadership meeting on Friday, I believe it was, and they're working hard to just understand what the 7-8 experience was. I've included them in the 7-12 model because there are some overlaps in the offering of credits and the kind of schedule that they have set up there. But I think the board and the community are aware that the middle school is certainly not a high school and absolutely not an elementary school. But just for convenience and number of slides, we've included them in this model. At the secondary level, we would hope that, teachers are going to communicate out the learning targets and what success looks like for kids. And here are the due dates and here are the assessments for the week. Sharing those opportunities for face-to-face Zoom sessions and new learning, provide formative assessments that they're going to give feedback around, and monitor student progress, and I get that idea about value of learning as an indicator of attendance, continuing to check in throughout the week and offer support resources, and then collecting those assignments on a particular due date and providing meaningful feedback and letting students know where they're at in the learning progression. And we would expect that students would have to engage every day, participate daily, stay on track, and we're going to need the support of the parents and the families and provide the training for them so that they understand that their student is engaging in a meaningful way, making progress towards graduation. So that's what the 7-12 instruction would look like for teachers and students and parents. Questions about that model? It's very similar to what we had in the PK6. So what would a day look like? The format that we've selected is Google Classroom. Our teachers are familiar with it. Our students are familiar with it. We're able to provide professional learning around that for those new to our system who need a refresher. That would be the primary platform for weekly assignments and instructional resources. We expect that the students will check in with their teacher through email or Google Classroom or a live Zoom session, but that they would engage right from the jump. Perhaps on Tuesday, individual teachers have scheduled Zoom sessions. I know that the high school and the middle school are coordinating days of the week that particular teachers would participate, so that you wouldn't have a student, spending 3 consecutive hours in 3 different courses on Zoom. We would ask that be balanced throughout the week to allow kids to participate in the most reasonable way that allows them to find success. Again, check-ins with their advisory and homeroom teacher are really a home base to check in with folks so that we maintain those connections. That's always been a component at Othello High School through their advisory structure, and we'd want to continue with that. And midweek, they hand in those formative assessments. It's a good opportunity for teachers to check in and make sure that students are making progress, understand where they're at, perhaps schedule a small work group or Zoom session for kids who are struggling based on what they learned about students through the formative assessment. And on Friday, you turn your stuff in. Teachers are going to check that work, provide feedback, and we move forward to the next week. So that would be a week that what it might feel like for a student in our system 7-12.
Can you define formative assessment? I'm sorry.
Yep, absolutely. So a formative assessment, it's a wide variety of things in a classroom, but it's really about in-process evaluation of student comprehension, student learning needs, and academic progress. So an example you might see at a secondary level could be, you could ask a student to draw a concept map in class to represent their understanding of a topic. That might not be a pop quiz that we might have been used to in our experience in schools, but it could show you, okay, that kid, they get where I'm going. The map that they drew is representative of what we've been talking about. That kid, his map wasn't so great. I need to check in with him on a Zoom. It could be submitting 1 or 2 sentences identifying the main point of a lecture. I've just talked for 30 minutes about online learning. I would ask each board member, would you please write 2 sentences that capture the main ideas of what we've talked about and submit those through Google Classroom. And so as a teacher, I'm going to read through those 2 sentences and say, Jen asked a lot of questions during the meeting, but she still didn't get it. So I'm going to set up an individual Zoom with Jen. That's really what a formative assessment is.
Great, thank you. And it's wonderful to see like an idea of what the classroom, the week will look like. This was so helpful to see and kind of understand both for the 2 different age groups to kind of understand what and where, what you were talking about and how it will look. So this was super helpful. Thank you very much to include that.
Okay, Pete, I'm going to kind of get off the track here a little bit and go on to how's it going to work with state assessment testing with this?
Yeah, our current understanding is that state assessments are going to be on pause again this school year. That's the latest report we've received from the state of Washington, that we'd go another year without the formalized state assessments based on where we're at currently. You know, if things clear up and at Christmas time they say, hey, we're going to take state assessments in the spring just to kind of see where everyone's at, we would want to be prepared for that. But our current understanding is that that's not going to be a requirement for us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good question, Ken, and really a dilemma that teachers are struggling with, not just the state assessment piece of it, but I think they're all really concerned about the gaps that are being created and not addressed when we're not in school, because being in school face-to-face is certainly what everyone wants. And when they do come back and where things feel like they have in the past, that assessment component and checking in with kids to see where they're at is going to be all the more important, so that we start off on the right foot with them. But my understanding is that won't be a factor this spring. The next slide describes what a week might look like for one of our classroom teachers. Again, this idea about dropping in assignments, content videos in Google Classroom, holding Zoom sessions, those kinds of things, perhaps according to the bell schedule, if that's what the site determines and that's what students are prepared for, creating those assignments when they're not holding Zoom sessions, and recording content delivery that a student could use offline, right? They could asynchronously, they could check in and go back to a video. I know that we're finding, and even in our meetings, that we're recording those meetings for folks who can't participate or who might want to go back and review something. So we're getting better at that as an organization, and I think as public educators, and we're going to provide the training around a particular product called Screencastify for our teachers. You can also record a Zoom session and be able to share some of that content with our students. Thursday, again, a chance for teachers to grade assignments, perhaps provide an additional Zoom session for particular students, and then, you know, move into Friday, checking in on those assessments, getting stuff ready for Monday to drop for students again. So I think we'll get in a rhythm if it looks like we're going to be online for a while, and our teachers will get really good at you know, what the system feels like. So that's what a teacher day week might look like.
So you're talking about recording their content delivery videos and such like that. Are you planning on a video per, like a camera per classroom, a specific camera set up in 2 or 3 places per building, or them doing it from the computers they currently have? What are your thoughts? What are the thoughts there?
Yeah, we're gonna share in the summary. Another potential fiscal impact is around hardware, so that our staff can find more success in producing that kind of content. We've talked about a range of things, from a webcam and a headphone with a boom mic like I'm using tonight, and what that might cost, all the way to a laptop that has all the bells and whistles that would allow teachers to do that, and what the potential cost might be there. So I think we're going to come up with a couple of plans, consider the return on investment and really what the standard would be to deliver that kind of instruction. But in a classroom setting, you might imagine if I had a USB extender and I could set up a webcam in the middle of the room, I could go to my whiteboard, deliver my math lesson. Students could be watching that live. I might be able to record that, load it up to my Google Classroom, send out a talking points message to parents saying, hey, the 8 of you weren't in class today. The lesson's online. Make sure you check it out, because the last formative assessment I delivered, you really struggled. I'm going to have a Zoom session on Friday from 8 to 9. You need to be there because you need some help. That's kind of how it would flow. And so we definitely, to make that happen, we need our teachers to have access to the right tools. So again, we're thinking about that range of a webcam on every machine set up in a particular area, to you know, a full-blown laptop that might have some of those components. But definitely the teachers did not have the tools necessary to pull that off in the spring. But we'll be ready to go with the professional learning and the hardware so that they can be more successful in the fall.
So since there's a ton more digital stuff, and what about for those that are digitally challenged or just can't function? Maybe that's not the right word, phrase. Those that have a harder time with those things, are you planning on putting more IT people in each building, or having have you discussed who's the point person for those problems yet per campus, or are you even there yet, I guess?
Yeah, well, we've certainly identified leaders in the system that are going to provide some of the training around the tools and resources. As it relates to the technical pieces of it, I think that staff who struggle with that are going to have to pedal really fast to get up to speed on this, participate in that professional learning. It'll be up to our principals and their support folks like our instructional coaches to go in and help those folks out. That's what we do in our regular model. So getting back to that idea about systems, what's already in place. If a teacher has been struggling with a particular classroom, and they say, I haven't experienced this before, who can help me? Lots of times it's an instructional coach. It's a grade level leader. It's an assistant principal or a principal. So we're really going to get our building administrators up to speed and our other support folks. And for those that struggle, they're certainly going to have to keep up because it's a new expectation at work, right? And we're going to support them so that they can find success and put people around them so that they're able to interact. But a variety of levels of expertise around technology, I think, in any industry, not just teaching.
Okay, great. Thank you.
How's this going to affect our ELL students? And also, we got one school out there that's a dual language school, Luticaga. How's this going to affect them, and what's their future looking going forward with continuing the great program that they did have in place there? And
yeah, absolutely. I think we think about language development for all of our students. We certainly have a significant number of students in our system that are ELL learners, and they're going to be impacted mightily by sort of the lack of modeling that they're not able to access when they're sitting in a classroom. The specific interventions that come in some of the small group activities, all of our kids are going to be impacted. And that's why we want to get back to an online model. That's why we want the numbers to come down. That's why we're presenting all three, because we know online is going to hit every kid. And it's not the ideal situation for us, but certainly they are going to struggle. All kids are going to struggle with adapting to the online piece and these gaps that have been identified for years across school systems across the country. That's really a primary driver for folks in saying, how do we open up safely? You asked another piece about dual language. So those folks, we're going to ask them to follow a similar pattern of assignments and Zooms and those pieces, knowing that they're also going to have sessions that they may run in Spanish, knowing that they're going to have to create opportunities for those language partnerships, knowing that they're going to have to consider, because at that school, the other factor, if we open in a blended way, is it's difficult to cohort groups of kids when they're swapping teachers and doing those kinds of things. So, each school is going to be impacted, Ken, and it's not going to be the ideal situation. I think I shared earlier that it's really a broken system right now that we're just trying to patch. But I'm confident that the folks at Luticaga, they think about dual. That's their first lens when they think about the work they're doing. And I know that Jen Perez and her team, Amy Wright, and their leadership team over there are thinking about ways that online they address the dual language components. But we're going to feel this for the next couple years in our community. Students are going to feel missing out on the activities that they missed last spring, and certainly for the first few weeks or months of school this year. This next slide is a callback to what we shared in the blended approach. It really comes from the learning that Jeff Utek shared with many folks across the state of Washington. And we shared it last time as a support for our blended approach, but we also shared that it was going to set us up for a successful pivot to an online system if necessary. And I think what we're sharing tonight is that at least in current conditions, that's going to be the move. This is about identifying the tools that the students and staff need, and also what we need to train up our families around so they can successfully teach and learn in a distance learning world. So we've talked a little bit about talking points. We had some success with that in the spring. We'll be providing professional learning around that. I described Screencastify, which is the asynchronous instructional video component. Chatted with Rigo Ozuna, and so we've purchased a district-wide license to make that resource available for staff, and training will be provided around that. Google Classroom is really the platform we've been living in. So we'll continue to provide training for folks who haven't used it as much, but we know our students are pretty quick in picking up those products. And then office hours and SEL and connection for synchronous video, our platform is going to be Zoom. And again, John Wiseman and the professional learning team have put together a week of PD, the week of the 17th. Certainly the concept that was shared earlier about a need for additional training and the fiscal impact of that work that Director Stevenson shared. We're ready to move with that. And I would also remind folks about, the soft opening of school, if we want to adjust what that first 4 or 5 days of school feels like, so that we can provide this training for our families and our students once the teachers are up to speed. But the core 4, what was helpful with that in the blended idea, we knew they were going to be pieces of our blended. Now it will really be the focus of our instructional delivery. So I just wanted to remind the board that that was a component in both areas.
Just to verify or clarify, synchronous means live, like we're doing now. Asynchronous means recorded that could be watched at any time that best is for that student. Is that correct?
Correct. So if after this session, I said, I looked at my teaching notes and 3 of the directors really didn't seem to understand when I said talking points, the questions they asked me and the questions I asked them, I could tell they were confused about talking points. So I'm going to make this 10-minute video sharing my screen, and I'm going to be letting them know this is what talking points is about. Then I'm going to post that to the Google Classroom that they're all a member of and say, hey guys, I noticed that there was some struggle with talking points. Watch this 5-minute video, and I'm going to check in with you after you've had a chance to do that. And so a student could access that at any time. They could access it multiple times. That's another advantage, that they could go back in and check in. They could share it with the parent and say, hey, the teacher sent me this, but I still don't get it. And the teacher or the parent and the student could walk through it together. So that's the asynchronous. That's the value of that video. Additionally, that can be helpful for kids who don't have internet access. And so if they do find themselves in a spot at they go to grandma's house, which they've typically been going to, or they find a spot near one of our campus sites, that they're able to log in and download that video and then watch it offline. That's another reason that we wanted to have the asynchronous option available, just to increase the level of access.
Okay. So in Google Classroom, is there a way to only share some of those asynchronous videos with just individual students, or is it, if you're sharing it, it's shared with the whole classroom?
Yeah, I don't profess expertise around Google Classroom, but what I do know about it, that teachers are able to leverage particular components for small groups of kids. So I think through our platform, I'd feel confident in saying they could identify those small groups and share out a particular support for kids. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
The next slide, I think it's important that we call back for the community and for the board that the professional learning opportunities that are going to be available as we make adjustments to teaching and learning for an online model. There's going to be a lot of learning for staff, a lot of learning for our families, and we're hopeful that that's going to lead to learning for our students, that we're going to do a much better job than we did in the spring. We're going to be much more prepared, and that we transition to a blended and then full traditional model when it's safe to do so. But these professional learning opportunities will be based around the online learning standards for the system. The last slide is just a summary of our conversation. I did want to recognize the excellent input we got from staff throughout this process, and particularly last week when we shared the presentation that we shared with the board 2 weeks ago. Let you know, I hope you understand that everyone is preparing for the online components, and that work has been ongoing from the jump, really. And now we know that it really is probably going to be our reality as school opens up. There were some questions throughout the presentation around the fiscal impact and this idea about hardware for folks and so that they can perform their duties, and the need for additional professional development. So I hoping that those questions would come from the board and they understand that there could be a fiscal impact as we prepare for the opening of school. We would expect that we would share that planning with you pending approval of the model as presented. And so really what we're asking is, the CDC was really clear in saying that, it is best if schools are open, and key considerations that school administrators were asked to think through were the transmission rates in the immediate community and the communities in which our students or our teachers live. And we know that in Adams and Grant County in particular, that the numbers are elevated, and that the level of community transition is not at a state where the Department of Health says we can open in a blended or traditional approach. And so what we're asking is that the board consider the traditional, the blended, and the online components as presented, and that we will, pending that approval, we'll be submitting the template to OSPI, indicating that we had board approval and adoption of a resolution, and also that we have established a partnership with our local health officials. And the operational details, as some have been discussed this evening, would continue to be developed and refined. And I would imagine that each board meeting would include an update on where we're at prior to the start of school, and once school gets going, consistent updates for the board and the community about where we're headed next. So that's really what we're sharing with the board and the community this evening, and asking for consideration of approval of the reopening plan as discussed in the last two board sessions.
I do have one more question that I think that we didn't get to on the screens and stuff. What about sports? If we're in an online only method, current ability, what will happen with sports?
Yeah, the WIAA came out with a series of guidelines recently, and they have adjusted the sports seasons across the state. I think that was an initial attempt to keep those activities available and open for students. We're planning registration here in the next week to 10 days, and we're going to continue to allow athletes to sign up. And we're working from the assumption that we're going to be able to participate in those activities. The WIAA identified activities that don't require, that can promote social distancing. And so those activities have been moved into the first season. And locally, if we're able to meet the standards and able to have practice and offer those activities, I think we certainly want to do that. But that will be determined at the time of the onset of the season and where we're at in the community with the transmission rates. But certainly the expectation to participate in an educational experience online, to track attendance and do those kinds of things. Athletic participation and activity participation is tied to attendance. So absolutely, we would expect that we would be able to offer those events if the health conditions allow it and the student is engaging in the work.
So you think that that certain sports, even if we're doing online and a student is participating online and their grades are where they need to be to participate, you think that there are certain sports that can still take place if we are forced because of current outbreak numbers to be online only? You think there are certain sports that can still take place?
I don't have the WIA guidelines in front of me, but as I understand it, I believe activities like golf, cross country, some of our typical spring sports were moved to the first season. And so in those activities, if you can promote social distancing and have practice and meets and competitions in a safe format, that yes, those would be allowed. I really think as we've talked a lot about teaching and learning tonight, but those opportunities for students to participate in extracurricular activities, that's an important it's an important piece of the structure of public schools. So we're going to do all we can to create those opportunities for our kids and our coaches. But really, it's going to be driven by the health conditions at the time. But as of now, we plan on offering those activities for the first season and giving our kids a chance to get out there and compete.
I have a question. I remember in the last meeting, Pete, you had said that if we start with the blended model, then 9 through 12 could not transition into like a full-time schedule. What if, okay, so we're going to start most likely with our online only component. Can, let's say somehow in January, COVID, fixes itself. I know K through 8 will be able to go back to school full time, but will 9 through 12 be able to do that?
Yeah, the last time we talked, we were describing the schedule as designed at Othello High School, and what the Department of Health shared with us in reviewing the planning, not just for our school district, but others in our region. It gets back to that word cohort. And when they talk about secondary schools, they are medical experts, and we're deferring to them on that component. But when they describe a cohort at a high school, they would be saying that the people in this Zoom session tonight, you're one cohort, and you're going to stay together all day. And we're going to give you some flexibility and let you move a teacher around, but you're going to stay together. And that becomes a next to impossible task in a high school when you might have some freshmen who need algebra and another freshman who needs algebra too. It's going to be very, very difficult to schedule that. Now, online would allow us some more flexibility and to include student choice and voice. So we would open up in the online model and then think about, well, we've been allowed to bring back a blended model K-8, but perhaps at the high school, we would have to say, we're going to stay primarily online, but we're going to bring back these cohorts of kids or families who have requested it or need additional support. But it will be very difficult to maintain the cohorts if the disease levels are elevated. Now, if it comes down and we're in a healthy way in the community, then we could absolutely bring them back to campus. But that cohorting idea does not lend itself to a high school model where you give students choice and voice in their schedules. So if we wanted to open, if just for the sake of coming back to campus, we would have to really tighten up and not give students choice on their course load. And that's not something we've wanted to approach at the secondary level. We want to give them some flexibility. So I guess let me clear it up for you, Lindsay. If we start online, it allows us to run with the same schedule that we presented last time. If we transition back to blended, it might not be as open as the K-8 campuses. It might take a little more time till we felt safe where we could bring that many kids back.
So that makes sense. My understanding last time was that in the blended model, you had to switch into a semester schedule. So you couldn't go back to full-time school because it transitioned back into trimesters, and because of the way that the schedules were going to work, you couldn't go from blended into full-time. So my question is, can you go from online to, let's say they come up with the vaccine in January and Jay Inslee says everyone is free to go back to school full-time. Could the high school, could 9 through 12 go from an online learning back into a full-time? I know it's a long shot and something like that probably wouldn't happen. I'm just curious, could we transition back into full-time school, or are they on a semester now that they're doing online? What does that look like? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yep, it makes sense.
Okay.
And I think the way you've asked it, if we got the green light and could bring everybody back, really quickly, you could run the online sessions on campus. You could have everybody there. You could have everybody on site. You could create additional cohorts. What I shared last time, around the secondary schedule, I was trying to be really clear with the board and the community that shifting back is going to be very, very difficult if we open up in the 3x4 schedule or the 4x3 schedule as presented. And that gets really complicated in a secondary schedule. We could come back to campus, but what they've done to maintain student choice and to maintain the flexibility in the schedule and to accommodate teacher preps, it might be a situation where if Lindsay, you were an algebra teacher and I assigned 40 students to you in the AB model, you're going to have 20 one day and 20 the next. And I can assign you 40 because the room is safe for 20 students. And in a blended approach, that works okay. Now, if things clear up and we get to come back, all of a sudden, you have 40 algebra students in your classroom. And so that's one of the significant challenges around workload and classroom size that makes going back, even though it might sound like it's an acceptable approach, that makes it very difficult at the secondary level. So just a bit of clarity around what I shared before. That's the rationale behind it, that it's going to be very, very difficult to go back. But certainly if the campuses are open and kids can come in, yeah, I think we'd bring everybody back and think about how we provide services and interventions and supports with all of them on campus using our network and our people and our expertise, and letting them interact with each other because they've had a significant break.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, one of the things I've been hit with quite a bit is I've heard a lot of the comments from different people out there that said that if they have to end up doing online teaching, they might as well just go to homeschooling for their kids. And I know there's many different programs that are really starting to push out there now that for online teaching and stuff. What can we do as a district to help convince those parents that their kids still might be better off in the public school system? And what can we do to still entice them to stay?
Yeah, I think presenting a coherent plan, letting them know that this is what our folks are working on and thinking about. This is why we're taking the approach, over communicating where we're headed, and reminding them that I think we would all agree that there is no ideal solution. And if they think that I guess from an educational practitioner approach, if someone came to me in the store and said, "Hey, Pete, I want your opinion about this. You work in schools. I'm thinking about going with such and such academy online, or I can do this online piece through the OSD," I'd want to say, well, what's your relationship been with the OSD? What do you know about the teachers that work there? It sounds like you had a bad experience in the spring. That was really hard for them, but I bet they're going to do better. I think we'd want to have those kind of conversations with folks in a community our size and with the options available. I would hope that people understand we have some really high quality teachers and administrators and support staff in our district, and that we're the best game in town. And if they want to pick a different option, I suppose they could consider that. But our people are doing the best they can under very difficult circumstances. And, I'm proud to say that my kid's going to be a student at Othello High School next year, online or not.
All right. Well, I really appreciate that presentation, Pete. It goes without saying, thank you to everyone who's involved in that. I know there's a myriad of people that are your supporting cast. I just wrote down questions. Some of them were addressed as we were going. But I think my next comments are basically are for the board in consideration of our next step. I'm going to be very transparent as I say what I'm about to say here. Before this meeting started, I was ready to not vote on anything tonight. I was ready to say, our drop dead date is August 13th before our plan needs to be submitted to OSPI. Everything's changing every day. I want to wait till then to submit our plan or to approve one, even if it takes a special meeting the day before our drop dead date. Hearing the presentation tonight and hearing Director Stevenson say that there was 40 cases today or new cases, I think our hopes or our aspirations for being able to open a traditional model are slim to none, our chances. Having said that, I do have this question, and I'm not sure what our start date is. Talia, is it August 24th? Is that our first? So it's the 27th. So if on the 17th, 2 weeks prior to that, there was 2 confirmed cases, would we open in the traditional model on the 27th?
I would just say for the epidemiology or the science of it, Mike, I think we would look at the prior 2 weeks. And if we meet the criteria and it says that we are at that 25 case mark or underneath that, then that would be a conversation. I think the teaching and learning team would then have to say, are we prepared? And I can let Pete weigh on this as well. I think we will have met the science of it, so we could potentially open to either a hybrid model or to a traditional model.
And I asked that question not wanting to create any controversy or make things harder than they already are, but just in transparency to our community, because I have been approached, as several of us have, with parents' desire, and most of the faculty's desire as well, to go back to school. I mean, realizing that we really want our kids back in school because that's what's best for them and all. But as I hear Lindsay's question as to if we can transition back, go forward or not, I'm basically saying this to say that I think, board, we need to make a decision tonight. But I want to be confident that if the situation were to miraculously change, we could be either in a blended or traditional model. I think it behooves us to make a decision tonight to let our folks offer the PD that perhaps some folks will take us up on. I don't want to have to wait till the week of the 17th and then everything be crammed in. If there's folks that are willing to start tomorrow, like Pete said, if the offerings are available, realizing that there is a price tag to this, I think that's something we need to consider. The IT infrastructure, you know, the cost of webcams or laptops, like Pete mentioned, I think if more likely it's going to be an online thing, I think we need to be prepared as that. But just knowing that there is a slight chance or wishful thinking that if things clear up, we would be able to go a different way. But I think for the sake of being prepared, for the sake of being able to put the community or parents at ease that distance learning 2.0 is not the same thing as it was in the spring, because we have learned from our past experiences, we are trying to do the best with what we have and what we can to ensure that, you know, there isn't going to be a student that's going to go 7 days without hearing from somebody from the district. There isn't going to be this disengagement that happened in the spring because there was no harm, no foul to whether you participated or not. Things are different. So having said that, I'd like the board to have a conversation here as to whether we're ready to vote on a resolution tonight, if we need more information, or where our thoughts at right now. Because like I said, I came into this meeting thinking I needed to delay some type of vote, but in the spirit of being ready, I guess, as a district and giving our teachers ample opportunity to get as educated as they want to, I guess, with the new PD that's out there. In the event that it does end up being an online model, I think we really need to consider that.
For me, I came into the meeting being able to see the writing on the wall. I would love, like everybody else, everybody wants to go back to school in a traditional manner. That's everybody's number one. If all the stars could align, we'd all love that. We'd all love a blended model, but the writing is on the wall for our state, we're publicly funded, all of the things. And so I would prefer to call a spade, give the teachers everything, all the access that they could possibly need to be prepared to help educate our kids come August 27th. And so I don't want to keep stringing them along. I'm super impressed with the district and all of the things that they came up with today. You can't help but just recognize the hours and hours of work that have gone into thinking of every possible scenario. And so I'm with you, Mike. I think we should make a decision tonight, move forward so that our teachers know a clear path forward, our students are ready for a clear path forward, and so there's no more guessing, because I mean, like I've already said, the writing is on the wall, and I don't see a situation where we go back to school in a traditional fashion by August 27th. I hope for it, I pray for it, but I just don't see it happening. And so I think we should give the resources to our staff and faculty so they can be ready. That's my opinion.
I too myself come in tonight really knowing not what to do. And I still have a few questions, but many people out there I know still have a few questions too. So kind of what's being presented to us tonight is actually three options: our traditional, a blended, and now we've added the full online, which I would really love to see every student back in the classroom for the health, for the benefit of the student as a whole. There's many factors that we got to look at as the student as a whole. And I believe traditional back to school would be the absolute best, but that's not stacking up for us right now. Looking at the numbers and especially seeing the number that come out today and the numbers that we have to meet, it's just virtually impossible right now. And for that to turn around in less than 1 month, I just don't see that happening right now. And I do believe that there is a lot of preparation if we do have to go to this online model, which it's highly looking like, that I agree, we need to start preparing. And not only does the staff and teachers and all those have to start preparing, but I believe we really need to start working with the community and the parents, because they're going to be one of the biggest players in this. I know it's going to cause a lot of problems, or a lot of families will have to readjust how they've been going, because I know they depend on their kids going back to traditional. We have a lot of single parents out there that work during the day. And so they're going to have to change a lot of different things, how their daily life goes on, because now they're going to have the students still remaining in the home. And not only that, we are going to be doing online school with them. And of course, this time there's going to be a few more expectations from them on this online basis. I do believe that we're really not picking one of these three options tonight. We're kind of accepting all three of them, which we can always hope for the best down the road, that we could eventually get to our traditional model. The sooner the better, preferably. But I believe, though, that we do need that communication with our parents and everybody involved right now.
I think that was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Pete, and all those involved. And there's no need for me to repeat everything that Mike, Lindsay, and Ken said, or Jen. I think we're just going to have to go with what they've presented, because they've done a lot of work in this, and it was excellent. I was totally surprised. I wasn't sure what to prepare myself for. And I also was not going to come in here and vote yes, but I can see that we need to take up a step now to go ahead for the teachers to prepare for the year.
Can I just throw a last minute question in? School starts the 27th. Did we have any dates set for, normally we have registration? And my question is, can we start early registration? Start it a couple weeks earlier, because it will give us a better picture by the time we get to the 27th on exactly how many students we're going to have. And the registration time could also be a time to also reach out to parents to find out about internet accessibility and what they need. So that's going to need a lot more time to it too. And normally I think they did it in 3 days or 4 days, but can we start early and take 2-3 weeks to start early registration online with a lot of students and parents?
Hi, board. This is Talia. I can actually speak on behalf of registration. We are actually going to start online registration on Wednesday. Although we have not communicated out, we are really just waiting for WIAA to make a decision regarding sports, which is scheduled to come out tomorrow, which is why we're just waiting to make sure that we have all of the information, because from our experience last year, as soon as we sent out information about registration, parents were asking about fall sports and sports registration. So we just want to make sure that we have all of the information at once when we communicate. So our goal is definitely to start blasting some messages on Facebook, and tomorrow you could actually go visit our website right now, and all of the information on registration is already updated on the website. Online registration, like I stated, will start on Wednesday, and we will be sending out that information. We also are waiting for tonight to see what the board was going to decide regarding our plan, because we do want to include something in the registration letter that we're going to mail out to all of the parents about online registration, and how we're going to be going into the fall, possibly in an online learning model, because there's going to be a lot of parents who are going to ask, they're going to question when they receive that registration letter, well, how is school going to look in the fall? What model are we going to before I register my student? I want to know. So we definitely wanted to just make sure that we had all the information tonight before we send out those letters. In those letters, we're also going to be providing all of the parents their username and passwords, so that way they could register online, because of course we want to encourage all of our parents to pay their fees, register for fall sports and register student registration online, so that we can minimize how many people come into our building. So we also scheduled in-person registration starting next Monday. It was originally scheduled for August 17th through the 18th, but we decided to move it up because, of course, we want to know how many students are going to be enrolled. So we will be doing next Monday, which is the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and the 6th. So Monday through Thursday. We're going to have 3 locations, so MMS, OHS, and Wajitas. And the reason why we selected those locations is because they have 2 gyms. Wajitas doesn't have 2 gyms, but it has the cafeteria and the gym. And we're using those locations because we can really ensure that we have social distancing guidelines in place. We're going to be asking our parents to wear masks when they come in to protect the health and safety of our staff, and of course for them as well. So we have a lot of information already posted on the website about registration. But like I said, we are just waiting for that final information that we're going to get from WIAA tomorrow, so we can start blasting the messages to our staff, to our community, and to all of our parents. Any questions?
No, thank you. Thank you for having that.
So Mike, what do we need?
I think Pete, you can try to answer this. I know that we've talked about perhaps repurposing staff in this transition or this opportunity for some employees that perhaps weren't totally involved in the education portion of it, or the academic portion of it. Will they be afforded professional development opportunities? Will somebody from transportation be able to take some PD on some of the stuff that we're going to do Google Classroom wise, or these other things we're going to do? Will they have that same opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's important that we give as much training to everyone in our system. Certainly, there are some requirements around job specific or job relevant activities, and so I'll coordinate that with John Wiseman as we think about the appropriate numbers. But we have heard some scenarios where districts are doing things like if they need support in the blended environment, monitoring student movements, and perhaps the bus routes aren't as well. Could those individuals come in and they help support managing transitions or making sure that folks are following those guidelines? Those kind of creative ideas are out there, and it'll be important that those employees understand the big picture around what we're doing. So absolutely, we'll work closely with our supervisors like Marion Shade, Jeanette Root, Orlin Favreau, Greg Foltz, Abby Helmus, some of those other folks in our system, and allow as many people as possible to participate, because we really are creating something new, an online platform for the Othello School District. And it will be important that as many people as possible understand that. So as we can accommodate, and as we think is, return on an investment worthy, we'll open it up to as many folks as possible.
All right, appreciate that, Pete. Is there any other questions or comments from the board?
What is it we need? Do we need someone to motion that we approve the resolution?
Can you start again?
What is it we need next? Do we need someone to approve the resolution?
I was just wanting to give everybody a final opportunity to make any comments. It sounds like we're ready to move on. So moving on to item C3, Resolution 20-006, District Reopening Plan. I'm debating whether I read the entire document, but I'm going to, just to be on the safe side here. I've been taking sips of stuff, so. Resolution 20-006, District Reopening Plan.
Wait,
Chapter
stop. We need one of the two of you in the same room. Echo. Chris or Mike has to, there we go.
Is that better, Jen?
Yep. Okay.
Resolution 20-006, District Reopening Plan. Whereas Chapter 28A.320 RCW authorizes local school boards to govern their respective districts, including the promotion of effective, efficient, and safe district operations. And RCW 28A.330.100 authorizes local school boards with additional powers. And RCW 28A.150.230 assigns local school boards the responsibility for ensuring quality in the content and extent of its educational program. Whereas on February 29th, 2020, Washington Governor Jay Inslee declared a state of emergency in all counties of our state under chapters 38.08, 38.52, and 43.06 RCW, and directed the implementation of the plans and procedures of the state's comprehensive emergency management plan in response to the novel coronavirus, COVID-19. And on March 13th, 2020, Governor Inslee ordered the closure of all public and private K-12 schools in Washington state until April 24th, 2020, to contain the spread of COVID-19. And on April 6th, 2020, directed that school buildings remain closed from providing traditional in-person instruction throughout the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. Whereas RCW 28A.150.290 authorizes the state superintendent of public instruction to make rules and regulations as necessary to carry out the proper administration of its statutory duties in unforeseen conditions. And on June 11, 2020, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction issued official guidance for reopening Washington schools for the 2020-2021 school year, which included sections on health and safety from the Department of Health and the Department of Labor and Industries, specifying employee and student safety requirements for reopening schools during COVID-19 pandemic, and requiring school boards to adopt and submit reopening plans for the 2020-2021 school year. Now therefore be it resolved that the Othello School Board has reviewed and hereby adopts its reopening plan for the 2020-21 school year, which addresses the mandatory health requirements, statutory education requirements, and additional expectations as identified by the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction's June 11, 2020 official guidance for reopening Washington schools. Be it further resolved, the board directs that the plan be posted on the district's website 2 weeks prior to the reopening of school. The board recognizes that the circumstances related to the reopening schools safely are mutable, and the reopening plan requires monitoring and possible revision. Therefore, the district superintendent will monitor the reopening plan throughout the 2021 year, and the district will revise and update the reopening plan as needed. Be it further resolved that the execution of this resolution is conclusive evidence of the board's approval of this action and of the authority granted herein. The board warrants that it has, and at the time of this action had, full power and lawful authority to adopt this instrument. This resolution pertains exclusively to the 2021 school year and sunsets no later than that time. I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 20-006.
I'll second that.
I need a motion first.
I'll second, like Sharon actually first did.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Director Schutte to approve Resolution 20-006. It's been seconded by Director Stevenson. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of adopting Resolution 20-006, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Board, I think we have done the correct thing tonight. I think giving our folks ample time to do the necessary things that they have to do, I think was merited tonight. Like I said, once again, Pete, the presentation was very thorough, very expansive, and inclusive of our current reality and the situation that's out there. And no doubt that your folks are ready to tweak it even more if necessary. I have full confidence that you guys are at the vanguard of potentially something else being thrown at you guys. And I appreciate, again, all the hard work. So thank you for that. Moving on to item E1, we have EL4 for review tonight. This is the first reading. There are a few recommendations. Someone added some verbiage here, so let's discuss this for a bit. I'd like to open the discussion by, I have no problem with the recommendation on item number 2. I will go ahead and this is EL4 staff compensation and treatment. With respect to compensation and benefits for employees, the superintendent shall not fail to employ the highest quality staff at the most reasonable cost of the district, nor jeopardize the physical integrity or public image of the district. There are nine items on that, and there is requests for modifications to 2 of them. And number 2, it said a failure to follow a board-approved compensation criteria, which outlines the methodology for determining compensation. The recommendation is that goes to a failure to focus on other districts in Washington State with 4,000 to 4,999 students, according to the contracts found in the Washington Association of School Administrators salary survey reports when proposing compensation while bargaining with administrator groups. I think the originator of this idea, if you could elaborate as to your intent.
So I know that we've been using a variety of different change. It seems like almost every year. We said a few specific districts a few years ago, and before that it was all the WAC, I think. This is just makes it so that we compare to a way to get those reports from specific districts in our state that have similar numbers to the number of our students. They're from, I think there's currently 8 within the 4,999 different districts in the state. It just makes it very clear. And people that are principals and vice principals have access to those reports, and those that are and directors, half of the directors have access to those. Those that do not could ask those that do have access to be able to pull up and look at those things. It's just something that's very clear in looking at all of the different superintendent's contracts throughout the state. Some of them actually referred to this, and I thought that this would be very helpful. And in the way that it said it before, a board approved compensation criteria, but it never listed what those were. It was so like could change constantly. So I just wanted something to be very clear where and how.
And just to make that a little clearer, are we needing to put a specific number? You mentioned there's 8 presently today. Do we need to have a specific number in there? I for one, like the rationale behind that change, but I just want to make certain that we're not tying our hands to that's the only 8 we can look at. If a district increases to those numbers to meet that criteria, can they be included as well, or what's your thought there?
So yes, my intent is any district within those boundaries currently, I mean, heck, in 3 years, we could be over that number and have to change to a different range for ourselves. Currently, there's 8 within that number. If there's more that go there, then we just, whatever district is currently within those numbers, that's what I'm looking for. Because that's where we're at also.
Okay. Any other comments pertinent to number 2, guys? All right, and then the echoes here. Number 9 in the same EL, a failure to encourage living within the district boundaries to all staff, but mandatory. This is the revision or the addition that is being proposed, but mandatory for those in administrative leadership positions at the vice principal level and above. New staff have 1 calendar year to relocate to within district boundaries. A grandfather clause would be in effect for those currently living outside of OSD boundaries, but if there is a change to another administrative position, then the clause would no longer be in effect. I will open this one with my opinion. While I can understand the wanting of people in these positions at a vice principal level or above to be members of our community, I have a little bit of a problem making it a requirement based on the fact that these folks have a 1-year contract. And I don't know if I would want to require somebody to make a 15 or 30-year mortgage decision on a contract that is guaranteed for 1 year. You know, they're renewable, but I don't know if I'm ready to be okay with that. Again, I think if we thought about this a little and perhaps some verbiage that encourages participation, hopefully when we're back to normal sports, normal community activities, things of that nature. I don't know. I have a problem with making it a requirement where there is a limit on the guarantee of their contracts.
It doesn't say they have to buy.
This one too. When I like the part where it does say, and this is what we have practiced, encourage living within the school district boundaries. But you do run into those circumstances where it's virtually impossible, especially when we're trying to bring in new leadership and administrators to find housing for them. Sometimes the market's really good and it's no problem, but sometimes that market is just completely shut down and it's virtually impossible to find something within a good price range that they're trying to find. Secondly, I think this would also create a problem with getting a really good candidate pool. Because if we had a position open, we have some great candidates that could possibly be coming from one of the many communities that are within traveling distance from us. And that would discourage them when they may be set up in Moses Lake with their home and their family's already there and currently, but they would be an excellent candidate for maybe a position for a principal or vice principal within our school district, but not willing to move. So I believe it would definitely restrict our candidate pool for those particular positions too. And it would limit it. They would definitely take a second thought if one of the requirements was if they were offered the position to move here, which, you know, I hope they would, but sometimes those circumstances ain't possible.
I happen to feel the opposite. You can't serve on a school board if you don't live here. You can't serve on city council if you don't live in the city. You can't be the mayor if you don't live in the city. I love what our community has done really well, which is we've cultivated leadership from our own community. So we raise up these kids that go to college, they get a degree, they come home as in back to Othello, they serve as a teacher, they work on their admin credentials, they become a principal. I mean, we have an assistant superintendent who went to school in Othello. I think that's pretty incredible. So my flip to that coin, Ken, would be when people love our community and they're invested in our community, they want to live in our community. And then you don't have the turnover like we see where we have people come in from out of town and use Othello as a stepping stone. And our school district invests time and money and energy into training them into our district's way of thinking, into our vision, and into all these other things. And they in turn use us as a stepping stone on their path to their real career. Now, I'm not saying that's every case, because I can name some people who don't live in Othello that are great people who work in our district, which is why I think that grandfather clause is super important. But for a principal, I mean, I just know when I was in PTA, the principal, I mean, she had to be there to run all the after school activities, the evening parent time stuff. It's a lot of work to make trips back and forth. So for me, I like this clause that you have to live in Othello, not to discourage outside candidates, but to encourage them to live in our community so that they're invested in our community. Now, just because you buy a house in Othello, I understand that doesn't mean you'll stay here forever. But if you buy a house in Othello and you put down some roots, you're more likely than somebody who, lives in Tri-Cities and says, ooh, I'm going to, work this job in Othello for 1 year while I'm waiting for a principal job in Tri-Cities. I would like to see us no longer be the stepping stone for people's careers, but to be the final destination. Like, ooh, I'm in Othello. This is where I want to be. Like, I'm invested. When it comes time to vote for a bond, our principals, our admin, our people who are running the bond campaigns, and our people who are trying to convince people to vote yes, they live here. They pay taxes here. They vote yes here. So that for me, I think what Jen wrote here is good, and I can see the logic behind it and why I think it's the right step forward for our district.
I think I've voiced my opposition to this, and I'll counter that with, we hire somebody from Moses Lake, Tri-Cities, Basin City, Connell, Mesa, wherever they are, and they commute for a year, they commute for 2 years, and then they realize, hey, this isn't a stepping stone. I hate to put this burden on them. Like I said, on a 1 year guarantee. What if their first, second, third years are what it takes for them to totally buy into this? I do feel that we would, again, not knocking our internal candidates at all. That's far from it. And your example of our assistant superintendent is a great example. But I do feel that if we went this route, we would be limiting our candidate pool. And this is a board decision, and I'm just voicing that I think the experiences we've had, looking back at least as me being on the board, these folks that have lived outside and had held these positions, I saw them totally engaged. I saw them at games. I saw them staying at the after school and getting home late, participating in the after school activities. I don't think their duties were being neglected at all. I saw buy-in there. I think we are limiting our pool is where I feel today.
And that's why I believe we should continue that first sentence. Encourage, maybe put strongly encourage living, but to hold them to a mandatory thing, I think would be the issue. I think that a lot of them would really have a problem with, especially if they work from an outside community looking here, is that mandatory, especially within a 1-year time.
Sharon, if you want to say something, I want to give you a chance to say it. I
can see both sides of what everyone's saying, but we do have staff here that does live out of town, and they come reluctantly every day. They come and they work hard here. They stay after. They'll come back on Saturdays. We've got some pretty good principals and vice principals, but we make it so that a vice principal cannot move up if we have this clause there. If they've worked hard, we want to keep them there. If they've been traveling for several years and they still want to be here, why would we want to cut them off and tell them you have 1 year to move here? If they're already settled with their families, some of them have spouses that have jobs in their town, so I like the first line, and I think we do encourage, but that doesn't mean that we say goodbye to them because after a year they can't make that step to move here.
So CBHA currently with their providers, it's part of their contract for 3 years that they have to live inside CBHA boundaries. And there's a couple of other reasons as well. Many of you said, or maybe it was just Mike said, that's a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. I'm not saying they have to buy a house. It doesn't say they have to buy a house. It says they have to live here. They could rent. We actually have those that have a family house in another city and rent here and only stay here during the week. My definition of living here is they vote here and they have to change their driver's license in order to vote here. So they could have 2 homes if someone chose to. I think if someone's not going to be able to vote here for or against a bond or a levy, then we shouldn't be paying them those high dollar amounts. Most of these people we're talking about are 6 figures. If they're not paying property taxes, even if they're renting, they're paying property taxes. They could contribute to our community. They could understand our community, not as much as they could if they lived here. And then if they have kids, to show support and strong views for living within our district and having their kids go to our district. I spoke with a real estate agent today, and they said that consistently there's between 8 and 12 properties within our school district boundaries. I'm sorry, they said within our zip code in a variety of ranges at all times. That's just to buy. I know rentals are even harder to get, but that's why I put the year possibility. So I want to give the example of myself. We came to this community and we thought it was a stepping stone for 18 months, maybe 3 years max. That was 15 and a half years ago. This is now my community. I plan on staying here for probably at least another 15 years, maybe even longer, because I fell in love. I would not have fallen in love with Othello or even understood Othello if, we could have lived in Moses and my husband could have commuted. If someone else has their spouse that is working in the community that they're currently living in, their spouse could commute if they commuted. And so I understand many of your things, but I disagree. I think it's mandatory for those in those positions if they want it. If they want to move up, then that isn't a choice that they would have to make.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
And that's what we want them to do. We want them to come here and love this community and move into this community because we all know how great it is. We love it. I've been here most of my life. And, but my fear of it is that word mandatory. I don't think we're even giving them the opportunity. Some of them won't even look at us to come here. If they see that word in there, it won't even give them, it'll turn them away right away. Any possible candidate, great candidate that we may have for a possible position. That's just my concern with that one word mandatory.
If they're that, if they have an issue, then I understand what you're saying, Ken, then maybe that's not someone that we want to have in a position of leadership, is my view in response.
I mean, maybe if it feels like a year is too pushy, maybe 18 months would be the right call. But I feel that if somebody wants to live here and make a life here, they're going to make the investment here. And if not, the majority will use us as a stepping stone. I mean, we've seen it. Even just in the short time I've been on the school board, I've seen it. So my ultimate goal is not my ultimate goal, but what I would love to see for the district is people using our district as their end goal and ending up here and investing their time, their energy, their money, their love, their heart and soul into the community, into our schools. When you see your teachers, shopping at your local grocery store or your principal, it brings you together in a way that if they don't live here, they don't shop here, they don't go to our community events, they don't go to the ball field on Saturday to watch kids play baseball and things like that I think are important when investing in our district. Now, I'm not saying that every teacher has to live here. This is just for vice principals and above. So teachers live in other towns and commute here, and that's all fine and good. I just think that for leadership positions, upper leadership positions in our district, that's when you're making a lot of money, people move for jobs all the time. It's not like we're offering them saying, move to Othello and we're going to pay you peanuts. Like, these are good positions. They're good career positions where we pay good money and we have good schools and great leadership from the top down. And so people shouldn't say, oh, I have to move there in a year. No, I'm not going to do it. They'd be like, that's a great job. I'd live in Othello to take that job. Like, I could make that my community. It's not like we're offering nothing.
This is just a recommendation. I would like more time. This is a first reading. I would like to table this because I want to do some personal research on other districts. I'm going to respectfully, and I say this respectfully, and this is the awesomeness of democracy, respectfully disagree, and that's okay. But I do want to further this with a little more research as to what other districts are doing, because I know that it was flipped on me a while ago. Somebody said, well, the husband that has or the other spouse that has the high paying job can be the one that commutes or what have you. An engineer at Pacific Northwest over there has a house in the hills, and his wife is an excellent principal. So we're telling that gentleman, come to Othello and you're the one that's going to commute every day. Or wife, you live over here, get your residency or a place to live over here, pay your taxes here, and go see him on the weekends, things of that nature. I think it's a little too extreme, but I want to do some research. And if it's okay, if I can get a consensus to table this and do a little more, like I said, research and put some more thought into this, perhaps change the verbiage. I don't know. So I'm seeing Ken and Sharon nodding. Jen, Lindsay, is it okay if we take a little more time before when we do something like this.
So you say table until when?
Table until the next meeting for sure.
Okay, I'm fine with that. And the only reason why I used that example is because of the family living apart and there still being a family home, is because I know it is already happening in our district. I'm not saying that that is what should happen or that that's ideal. I'm saying I know it already happens and it's happened more than once. I would hate to do that. I couldn't live apart that way, but I'm just saying, using that as an example that I know that's already happening. So I'm fine with it tabled into the next one. I'm okay with that.
Is it okay to ask Chris for his opinion of this? I mean, let's hear what you guys say.
Yes, I've talked to Jen off the side in a private conversation. I shared the same sentiments as some of you have shared, that I certainly understand Jen's intent and the board's intent, for those of you who agree with this. I certainly am for choice and for administrators to have the choice to, or the option to choose where they want to live. And I don't think that we're losing good people. I think we have several cases of individuals who have shown their commitment to Othello School District, to our community as well. I agree with some of what has been said here in the boardroom as well. Besides choice, one is just housing and suitable housing. And for me, that goes to choice as well. I know in my situation, I found it very difficult to find a place to live and in Othello, and we had to wait. Fortunate that we were able to find someone that was building in the area. It was in my contract. However, I chose to live here in Othello. That was my choice. And I am not a proponent of taking away choice from individuals. I do agree also that we would be losing potential great people who apply and want to be part of the work. And for them seeing the term mandatory, it could be a turnoff. I know I've talked to my admin team about this as well, and I would say that there's some consensus around this possibility of losing really good people or really good candidate pool just based on making it mandatory for people or administrators to live within school district limits or the city. So I did share with Jen at that time that I was not for this component of the EL. I do recognize that this is a board policy, but I do recognize that the board opposed me as well and asked for my feedback. So I will share with you that I'm definitely against element 9, just for the reasons for mandatory. And if it's appropriate, I know that there's probably some members of my team that will probably want to share. I'm not sure if Sandra's on the mic still.
Yeah, I can definitely chime in. I guess for me, when I read that, some flags went up for me that made me really uncomfortable. There's, I guess, several concerns that I have. One, it's already been mentioned. When you make something mandatory, it might make people a little uncomfortable. If that's the requirement when we're trying to recruit or onboard someone. We don't know their financial situation or their home dynamics. I know that we, just recruited a director who would love to live in Othello, but it involves several other things that need to take place, such as selling his home. And so, he could be trying to sell his home, but how do we know, how is it known that he can sell it within a year? And what happens to that person? Could we lose a quality candidate? Are we saying we're not going to renew a great employee because they couldn't relocate for whatever personal reason to Othello? I know we have some administrators that commute. I think just a handful, great employees. We have one particular administrator who's been with us for 18 years. excellent, amazing, is invested in the community. He shops at the grocery store on the way to work and shops at the grocery store here in Othello on the way out. So I just worry a little bit about, I think someone mentioned tying their hands a bit and making it, it being a turnoff. I could see the side of, the taxpayer dollars and whatnot. But with us being a small community and our pool already being so small, I'd hate to make someone live here. I want them to want to live here and to be able to live here. Again, I go into not just knowing their personal family dynamics or what it may cause, what's going on in their home life that wouldn't allow them to live in Othello. Those are just some of my concerns. And I think Sharon brought up, we have a vice principal who's been commuting for years, and she can't relocate to Othello because of whatever issue it may be. And so then she wouldn't be able to apply for a principal position because she'd have to move. So are we losing, candidates in that mindset? Just some things to consider, I would say, and to really think about, because it is some very strong language around that.
If I could just add to what Sandra was sharing as well. She brought up a good point that I had thought of, but I didn't share. I can think of a handful of administrators that could be grandfathered in as this is written. However, there's that last portion that reads, but if there's a change in another administrative position, then the clause will no longer be in effect. So the way I interpret that, we could potentially have those individuals right now that are in key positions that if they wanted to promote and go up the ladder, so to speak, or assistant principal becomes a principal, if they don't currently live in Othello, then they will be bound within a certain time period to move to Othello. And I think that is something to consider as well, because then you're talking about uprooting families who have been in communities for a number of years. And as Sandra has shared, we have administrators who are certainly committed, who has been in their particular community for 18 years, who could be grandfathered, but then if they wanted to move up and get a higher position in Othello School District, then they would be bound to, at that time, uproot their families, lose the equity in their home, or get the money, and they would be mandated to purchase a house or rent a house in the community and commute back and forth, which just really doesn't settle well with me, or probably not those individuals as well. So just wanted to share those additional thoughts. I'm not sure if Pete is on the line and had any thoughts as well.
Yeah, I would just share quickly my philosophy as a principal in meeting with teacher candidates in particular, who may view this as a stepping stone. If they were a really good teacher for 1 or 2 years, those kids had a really good experience for 1 or 2 years, and I would take that over 3 to 5 years of mediocre effort. And I think that applies to our principals as well. If we have a really good leader who comes in and does really good work, and then they move on to somewhere else, I hope they remember their time and the lessons they learned here, but they did good work when they were here. And if we add an additional component to the applicant process and the applicant pool, it does make me nervous about losing those people. And I think, as Dr. Hurst just shared, we have some outstanding people in our system right now that would be impacted, particularly by the line that says, if you transition to another job, that clause goes away. And I think that particular layer of protection for some of our best folks is an important one to consider before the board adopted such a policy.
Great. I appreciate everybody's input tonight. And like I said, we'll bring this back at the next meeting. Again, I appreciate everybody's input. I appreciate the fact that we're still smiling at each other. it's a great thing, because I think at the end of the day, we're in it for the right reasons. We're trying to make Othello better with all the decisions and policies that we implement. And I'm sure at the end of whatever we come up with, that'll be the case here. Moving on. Leah, could you share your screen to the actual agenda? Upcoming events. I didn't see anything in there. Please, let's do the board self-assessment of this meeting. Let's keep ourselves accountable like we've told ourselves that we would. I want to thank everyone for tonight. It's been a rather lengthy meeting, but I think a very productive one, a very informative one. To those community members who are still on and are still listening or watching, thank you very much. Pete, your team, the entire everybody who had a piece in what went on tonight, thank you very much. Going forward, I have full confidence that if there's any people that are not totally sold on or bought in on what we're trying to do here, let's get on board. Let's be part of the solution and not make the problem bigger. We're doing this for our kids. We are doing the best we can with the situation that we're living in. We're one day closer to being out of this situation. I'll continue to say that. Again, we are Othello strong. We are OSD strong, and our resiliency as a community is gonna shine through this. We're gonna come out of this a better community, a better district, a better group of employees, and hopefully we will be impacting the lives of all our students. Having said that, all our business or all our topics have been addressed. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.